Good morning again, and welcome again to the Senate. It's a privilege for us to be, for the deputy and for me, to come welcome you to this meeting. And I hope it could be a so useful meeting for you in those 2 days here in Madrid, in Spain. She is from Madrid, so I think that she corresponds to welcome you to Madrid. I welcome you to Spain. I'm from Canary Island. I'm a senator from the regional parliament in Canary Island. My name is José Antonio Valbuena Alonso. I'm from Socialist Party. Like I told before to the other college, in Spain we have two systems with two chambers. The upper chamber is the lower chamber. The upper chamber is the Senate, and the lower chamber is the Congress Deputy. But in the really most important chamber is the lower chamber, and the upper chamber only is important in the name, but not in the fact. So, for those who can do the visit before this meeting, now we are under the main plenary hall, right? This is another hall. It's a commission hall. It's of the different commission hall is the bigger one. It is a hall for the very important meetings like this one, and also for meetings like the regional meetings, other commissions that are mixed between the Congress of Deputies and Senate. And I said you before, in Spain, the Senate is a mixed election system because 206 members are elected the same days that the deputies are direct elected by the citizens, and the 56 rest of members are elected, appointed by the regional parliament. So it's indirect elections. So this is why the president, the first minister in Spain, is elected in the Congress of Deputies, because all the members of the Congress are direct elected in the same day that the election day. I think I couldn't say you anything. That wish you good luck in these 2 days. I hope you could enjoy Madrid. This beautiful city is Madrid. In those very hard 2 days you have in front of you. So I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Eugenia. Eugenia is a deputy from Madrid, I think so. No? Yeah. Yeah. So the floor is yours.
Okay. Good morning. Okay. President of the Public Affairs Community of Europe, Laura Florea, Vice President of APRI, Irene Matías, Senator Valbuena, College. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to take part in the opening session of this European Public Affairs Conference. I would like to congratulate APRI and PRAISE on organizing this event, which is, I think, a valuable opportunity to exchange experiences and ideas about the public affairs sector. Allow me also to highlight the important work carried out by public affairs professionals who strengthen and promote public and private dialogue to promote public and private dialogue every day with professionalism, transparency, and commitment to the public interest. At this year's APRI Assembly, I think in April, perhaps, the Deputy Secretary for Institutional Regeneration, Cuca Gamarra, expressed our commitment to promoting new public affairs regulations. What I think is these regulations should be based on 3 aspects: the highest standards of transparency and ethics, the creation of a national register of interest groups, and an independent supervisory authority. I think a strong and continuous dialogue between civil society and public administrations is essential to contribute to the common good and to strengthen citizens' trust in public institutions. I hope you have the opportunity to enjoy and discover Madrid. It's a city, it's an open city, welcoming, and also it's, I think it's a very happy city. So I hope you have this opportunity to discover this country that always is pleased to receive visitors. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eugenia. I would like to give the floor to Ms. Laura Flores.
Thank you so much, Senator Valbuena, Congress Lady Carballedo, dear Irene, I can't see you very well, dear Maria Rosa, my dear colleagues. I will try now a bit of Spanish. Buenos días y bienvenidos a la cumbre anual de Pace. Is this good?
Yeah, it's fine.
Thank you. It is my absolute pleasure to be here and honor, obviously, to stand before you this morning in this extraordinary building. We had a tour this morning, which was amazing, absolute amazing. We visited a room, I will say this out loud, we visited a room where we saw books which had the sessions of the Senate since 30-something. And I found this absolutely amazing. Man, this is history, I would say. So thank you so much for hosting us here. And thank you so much to APRI for the extraordinary work they put in organizing this event and the generosity of doing it. And thank you to Maria Rosa, because your fingerprints are all over the development of PACE over this period. I don't know if you know this, but I will remind you this, Maria Rosa. This year, PACE marks our 15th year since we met and we established Public Affairs Community of Europe. And for those of you who don't know, it was at the beginning an informal platform. It was started by Il Chiostro in Rome. And thank you so much, and I can't stop saying this every time, that Il Chiostro started all this gig, which lasted for this long. And I also will remind you, dear Maria Rosa, that our second meeting was in Madrid with APRI, and we were in a small room with OECD, with just a handful, maybe not a handful, 2 handful of people. And we were, I don't know, 10 persons, maybe. And at that point, we thought, okay, we'll have an impact, because I think that that was when we first influenced OECD to change their recommendations for lobbying. They had completely different recommendations before they met us. So at that point, we thought, okay, we'll do something out of this and we'll have an impact. So it is, here we are, 14 years after, we are here, and there you go. So I just want to take a minute to tell you where we are today, and I think that also it is important for everybody to know this. If I would to choose one word about our past years, is consolidation. And a year ago, we spoke how to invest. I will give you just some examples. Last year, we spoke about how to invest in younger generations of public affairs professionals. And this year, we happily report that we had our first, I'm looking for Václav, we had our first Young Professional Academy in Prague, thank you to APA, where 25 young professionals from across Europe and our members joined, and they had a meaningful 2 days, 3 days there. And I'm also happy to say that we will continue, and this year we'll have our second edition, which will be hosted by PAPT in Portugal. So that is, I can't see, there you are, I'm sorry. So there, and thank you so much for hosting this this year in the fall. Also, I'm happy to say that a year ago, our map of Europe had quite a lot. We have this map on our website colored with the countries that are our members. So we had quite a big chunk of Europe colored, but this year we'll color the map even more, because we are happy that Netherlands will join us this year. And thank you, Peter, for joining us. And also Poland, which started last year, will consolidate there, and they will join PACE. So there, every year, we consolidate our footprint in Europe, and that is also a big joy for us. And last year, we also did something else. We consolidated our identity. We launched our new website, our new way of engaging with the community. We have more and more people who are reached by our monthly newsletter. We communicate more and better with our community, and I'm very happy about that. So, well, tomorrow, this is something also important, and thank you, APRI, for this, first of all. Tomorrow, the University of Salamanca and APRI and PACE will sign a tripartite partnership that gives our profession something that it has long deserved, also an academic, so to speak, home. And we'll sign this partnership for research in lobbying and lobbying regulations across Europe. So there you go, and next year, and probably sooner than that, we'll be most happy to report on our developments on that side. So this is not isolated achievements. This is the work of PACE. This is the work of our board, and I would like to thank a lot, very much, my fellow members of the board of PACE for all their work. Thank you so much. And it is something that we're doing, we are growing, and we are having a contribution to public affairs profession and community in Europe. So today I will just give you just a brief hint of what we'll be doing today, and I hope I'm not wrong with what I'm going to say. But today you will hear colleagues from 6 countries, I included, who will speak about, will report about new regulations, development in lobbying and public affairs in their respective countries, and will give us a hint of where Europe is heading towards regarding regulations. Also, we will hear about how artificial intelligence is reshaping our work, because it does. It truly does, yeah. And what are the challenges today for our profession? How stakeholders themselves see us? Yeah? And we will close the morning with Charles Powell of the Elcano Royal Institute on the geopolitical moment that Europe finds itself in, and because, well, just because. Everything we do is downstream of that, right? So, to all of you who traveled to be here, from Sofia, Prague, Berlin, Rome, Paris, Vienna, Lisbon, Bucharest, Brussels, Warsaw, Hague, from across Madrid and Spain, and beyond that, thank you. Okay. And, you know, PACE is you at the end. So, welcome to PACE, and let us begin, and please, I think you have the word.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura, and well, honorable members of the Parliament, Mr. Valbuena, Ms. Carballedo, distinguished authorities which are here representing PACE, that we have, if I'm not wrong, more or less 16 countries, here with us. Members of APRI that are always supporting us here in this kind of events, these important events. Colleagues, friends joining us in this room. And well, if I'm not wrong, there's also people joining us online. It's a really true honor to take part in this opening session on behalf of APRI, that, as you know, we are hosting this year the PACE General Assembly. The Spanish Public Affairs Association here in the Senate. First of all, I would like to convey the apologies of our president, Carlos Parri, who for personal reasons, as many of you know, has unfortunately been able to join here in this important session. This important session where we not only talk about public affairs in Spain, but we are opening our views to what's happening all around Europe. I would also like to thank the Senate for hosting us. It's a really important also chamber for us, especially in Spain, as the Senator has explained in the visit, because in Spain the regions play also an important role from a regulation point of view. The fact that we are gathered here today, every one of us, is in this parliamentary setting, is also because it's we are organizing this in the framework of the Open Administration Week, an Open Administration Week where APRI forms part, where we think it's really important to explain what the public affairs professionals do and how we connect, we work with different public administrations, Since the founding of APRI 18 years ago, that was a long time ago, Maria Rosa, who is here, she knows very well. It's been a long way. Today we are a big association. Thanks to all our members, we only don't have professionals. We have over 3,000 professionals. We also have 30 organizations. Not only as we say, not only companies, we also have NGOs, we have consultancies that are dedicating to lobbying activities. And through all these 18 years, we have worked really hard. We have worked really hard to try to, in first place, obviously, push a lobbying regulation, which, as you all know, is very important for us. We need to set several rules that state how we need to have a dialogue with our different stakeholders, especially in the public sphere. And we need to have a regulation that establishes this. Unfortunately, in Spain, as you know, we don't have it. But it seems that things are moving on forward this week, especially. And so we hope, and we know it's difficult, that finally we have a lobbying regulation because we have a regulation for the government, but there's also, we have ongoing a regulation in the Parliament, in the Congress, but we would also need a regulation for the Senate. We're pending for that. But well, we'll go step by step, and hopefully we will finally get there. As many of you know, Today, the professional has reached really a new stage of maturity in Spain. We see it in this kind of event where we have lots of colleagues forming part of it. And we not also see that, see it here in APRI, we also see it all over Europe with our colleagues. They also have associations with many members that are dedicated professionally to the activity. No? And in this context, public affairs professionals, as you know, are playing a really important and demanding role, not only opening doors, that's sometimes the view that the society has on us, but we also have conversations defending positions, providing context, evidence, solutions, analysis. So we are really we have a really important role in the public-private dialogue. No? We see it, as I told you, this in APRI, which has over the years grown in its consolidation. APRI has worked, as I mentioned, to promote standards, to create spaces of dialogue, foster training. We currently have a diploma with a public university. Here is the director of the university, Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. And we also create spaces where all our professionals connect and try to bring the best practices in our professionals. In short, what we do in APRI really is we help to dignify our professionals, which when practiced properly, strengthens our democracy. I think we all agree in this. I would also like to mention here, we also have members working in Brussels, because there's a big community of Spanish professionals lobbying in Brussels. So here we also have them. I also would like to mention them. They are doing a really excellent job, because they are also promoting the activity and the professional there in Brussels. And in that same spirit, we have at European level, APRI, I think, as Laura has mentioned before, has really played an important role as one of the driving forces behind APRI. And here we have, I also would like to mention Maria Rosa, which was the founding member one of the founding members of PACE, and which has been pushing the association, this important European association, which helps the different professionals to connect each other in the different countries. No? That is why I think this meeting is really important for us, no? Because it helps to connect between APRI with other members of other countries. I would also like to mention, in line with this consolidation of the profession that also Laura has mentioned, that we see from the sector that the profession is growing and it's strengthening. In APRI, a few days ago, together with the University of Navarra, which is here, we presented the first overview of the public affairs study of the public affairs sector in Spain, the largest study of the profession ever carried in our country. This study, which two of the authors will present in more detail later, that we have them here, allows us to move to move from impression to data, from cliches, that sometimes we have the cliche of the lobbyist in media, to the real image of what is a professional represents. No? This perspective is especially necessary in a European context, as you all know, marked by major transformations. We have important challenges on competitiveness, technological regulation, energy transition, strategic autonomy, health, security, social cohesion, etc. And I would also like to mention that, as well, Laura has mentioned, that APRI tomorrow, together with PACE, will sign an important agreement with the Universidad de Salamanca, which is a Spanish university, and we will develop an important study that will hold a more global overview on how the state of, which is the state of the profession. No? So really, I wouldn't like to, extend my intervention. I would also like to ask the Senator and the Congresswoman to help us to support the lobbying regulation. As Laura mentioned, it's really important for us. We are in an important moment. The profession is we are consolidating. we can demonstrate that we really have really good professionals, but we really need some rules for everybody, not only for the professionals, but also for the other side, no? So we really ask you to help us to push this regulation in the Congress now, and when it comes to the Senate, that we have the support, that we really think it's important. And with this, I will finish my intervention. I would warmly welcome you all to this important session today, and we really get good ideas and good connections out of all of this. Thank you very much to all of you, and now we are going to, I'll give the floor to the next section of today's agenda, which is what we are going to talk about lobbying regulation, not only in Spain, but a comparative view on how it's established in the different countries. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So the session is officially open, and now take the floor to Maria Rosa. I'm sorry if I have to go out because I have another meeting. All right.
Thank you so much
Okay.
again.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I hope to see you again.
Yeah. So do I?
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you.
He llegado un poquito tarde porque venía de una comisión.
No, perfecto, no pasa nada. Pero muchísimas gracias por recibirnos.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much. I don't know how many of you can say that lobbying regulation is your passion, but it is my passion. I'm super proud to be here in this panel, and just a quick explanation. The update on the regulation of lobby has been part of our DNA since the beginning, since the inception of PACE. And here with me are incredible professionals with an extensive background, but the reason they are here is that their countries have had developments in lobbying regulation in 2025 or early 2026. So I'm super happy to give the floor to each of them for 1.5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yes. No, we're going to keep the 2 minutes.
She started
snapshot.
with 2 minutes. Yeah. She told us 2 minutes.
We're gonna use the KISS strategy. It's keep it short, simple, and sweet. Okay? So thank you so much for sticking to this KISS rule. And I'm gonna start in alphabetical order of country. And then we'll make a little bit of dialogue and questions. And we're happy to take questions from the floor, only and as long as we stick to the times, because otherwise I feel responsible and liable for a complete disaster on the agenda. So let's start with Diana, please, from Bulgaria. Can you please give us your update from country?
Sure, thank you. I'll try to honor the 1.5 minute rule, but I can't refrain myself to actually just take a little moment to say thank you to all of you. I'm not going to repeat the names, but you bring a sense of belonging to this community. So now back to business, very short. Earlier this year, Bulgaria did finally adopt its first ever comprehensive legislative framework for regulating public affairs and interest representation. After, I have to admit, more than 2 decades of attempts to do it, either for lack of political will or lack of consensus. This never happened. It was really a long and winding road, as we say. However, the final impetus, the final accelerator to the adoption of the law actually turned out to be the commitment that the country had vis-à-vis its National Recovery and Resilience Plan. So that's an interesting detail, because it was not authentic political will, but rather the requirements that the country had to adopt vis-à-vis the broader reform on transparency, on good governance, on institutional accountability. About the details of the law, the title goes as Law on Transparency in Interest Representation, and it does put in place several mechanisms for transparency. And these would include, naturally, the electronic transparency register, which is going to be administered and looked after by the National Audit Office. There is an obligation for disclosure of meetings with public officials on both sides of the equation, lobbied and lobbying. And interesting detail, also disclosure of financial expenditure on the activities included. This is a detail which I didn't notice in the other countries, which is a problematic issue because it would step into breach of competitiveness rules, but this is a different story. We can talk about it later. After many revisions of the Act, finally there are exemptions of actors. So we have exemptions like in other countries, trade unions, employers associations, but also lawyers. The Act is still a long way to its finalization, because what we need as the next steps would be to have in place secondary legislation, where really the details are going to be developed, and the nitty-gritty, which is a problem for the time being. And in addition, the development of the transparency register. There is a transitional period, more than 9 months, but also there is 1 year of gratuity when there would be no sanctions if the register was not. So I need to stop here, I notice. Yes. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. I give the floor to Václav from APA from Czechia. Just a quick note, thank you very much for your clear presentation. I see, and this is a note for academicians, the mechanism of resilience and also the OECD entrance is an incentive to regulate, apparently not to Spain, but to other countries. Thank you, Václav. It's your turn, and you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. So I will try also to be brief. So I will just add 2 things to what Diana said. This obligation from the National Recovery Plan was also in the Czech case, and I think in the Romanian case as well. There are some spillover to other countries. And so we have a new law on lobbying after 15, 16 years of debates in Czechia, effective as of July last year, which by coincidence was 3 months before the general elections. So the results are still very unclear. The law, the only good thing on the law is that it's applicable to all lobbying entities. So for example, the trade associations, NGOs did not succeed to be put out, so everyone is included. That's the good thing. It might change in the future. There is a lot of strong pressure from some associations to be excluded, but for now it's like that. The bad thing is that the reporting lies only on lobbyists. There is no obligation whatsoever for lobbyists, for policymakers or politicians. There is, and also very important thing which is there is that the nature of interaction, be it in person, be it WhatsApp, be it email, there's no distinction between the nature of interaction. So if you send an email to an MP, It's the same as if you meet him and he tabled an amendment for you. And the so-called lobbying period is 6 months. So if you do it once, or if you do it 50 times during the 6 months, it's not reflected in the registry. So you can imagine how you can easily bypass the regulation. So for example, you meet an MP and you send to other 50 an email, and in the register it would look like very same. Yeah. So that's the bad thing. And so the result of this regulation, we are still in the early stage, but we had the first period, 6 months. So we submitted the reports in end of January for the 6 months for the second half of 2025. It's certain bureaucratic burden, yes. There's very unclear relation between you and policymakers, because they are not aware what you put in the registry, because they have no control over what you put there. And last thing, it doesn't say anything about how the board really works. So we trained our clients, we trained everyone how we should be compliant with the law. We even added some we added some obligations into our contracts with clients, so we will bear the burden for them. But otherwise, for the Transparency International and other NGOs are also not very happy, because the results are very vague and very, very general. So, and for the current government, there is a tendency even to relax the current regulation on the side of associations created by law, whereas chambers, they want to be excluded. So if this will go through, the law will be really very inefficient. But we made this, we tick the box, and there is a law on lobbying. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Václav. We see a trend clearly in Eastern countries. You're moving ahead very fast, and what we hope is that. We hope. I truly hope it rolls out. The law in Czechia. Dominic, it's your turn. Your law was approved a few years ago. Some experience from the past, and real quick. So.
Thank you very much. So I'm really, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here. And 2 minutes is really small. We have an important reform 2 years ago, and now we see the first service and implication of the new system. To explain German registration is complex. I need 2 hours, so I stop immediately. But our authorities told us that's the best regulation in the world. And I say it's the most complicated regulation in the world. And 3 objectives. The first one is also the German government told us this registration or this tool is the best monitoring tool for lobbyists. So the key element is not to be more transparent regarding the public. This registration, what we have in Germany, is in competition between lobbyists and media about what's going on. So I see all my contracts, I see all my competitions, I see the turnover of lobbying expenses. That's the key issue of our law. So it's to be really, really clear, this is not a kind of transparency register. It's not very well accepted by the public. The public is not interested. The only interest is media and my great colleagues in Europe. And come to a most important point, the executive footprint. We have done now, this means every document we produce as lobbyists, organization XYZ, in direct lobbying, we have to upload in the registration, so you can find hundreds of thousands of documents now. Data protection is, of course, an important point, but you can see it. What's this function? How many people looking on it? I don't know. But this comes to the last point, a really important point, because I look on Martin's European level. We have a new dimension in every lobby debate in Germany, also in Europe. That's the new political advertising directive of the European Union. This compliance issue, what's coming up, also reflects the complicated relationship between the national lobbying regulation systems and the European one. And this is like every time definition of lobbying advertising, of lobbying campaigns, who is in, who is out, still the big fights. I see Stefan Unger, my new president of Digipol, and my colleagues from Europe. It's a big fight, is same the old question, who is good and who is bad. And thank you very much, Maria Rosa. Now you are good, and now you have the floor back.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for keeping peace. it is true that it is a great advantage of a lobbyist to keep it short, simple, and direct. Dominic is a great lobbyist, and this is a proof of that. Portugal has come to lobbying through the big door, with an association in law also boom, boom. And I give the floor to Gonzalo Boavida from PAPT and to give us an update on the situation in a country that is very dear.
Thank you, María Rosa. Una palabra en castellano para saludar a nuestros hermanos, a todos. Muchas gracias por recibirnos aquí. Well, and I lost 10 seconds of my 90 seconds. Yes. Well, we had 10 years of debate and discussions in Portugal, and trying to give some feedback to the ones that are now trying to regulate and to create a law in their countries. So we had the law. It was just approved in January, and it will take place. It will be in force in the end of July, and we are right now in this 6 months period trying to regulate a few details. One of the problems is that the legislator can only legislate, and to put the law in place, it's not easy because it just makes the law. So in fact, we heard some members of the parliament saying, no, I'm not the one who's going to apply or to create platforms or to do whatever, because I'm just the one that makes the law. So be aware of that situation in your countries, because then someone must put the law in place. So that is one of the things that we are now facing. So we have a working group in the parliament that is now trying to regulate small details. And one of the things that we are now facing is we have two major things. We have the register of everyone, of all the lobbyists, and we have the register of interactions. The thing is, we, PAPT, the association, we make it clear that we wanted something centralized. So we centralized in the national parliament because they are the ones that have the means to put it in place and to create platforms and so on. They agreed. But now they just decided that they will only centralize the register of companies, so a database of everyone, all the details that we were talking about, but they will not centralize the register of interactions. So the register is national for presidency of the Republic, government, parliament, local authorities, administrative authorities. So the register is national, but the register of interactions will be of everyone's responsibility to create their own. So now imagine that the local authorities, we are a small country, but the local authorities, we have more than 3,000. Administrative, we have a few hundreds. Parliament, presidency, government, ministers, and so on and so on. So now each one of them will have to create a platform or a way of register interactions. So we are afraid that this would just put the law as a creation of a database of us, the lobbyists, and the register of interactions will be somewhere in someone's responsibility. On top of this, there are sanctions for the representation of interests if we don't register or if we do something wrong. But for now, because we are starting, there's no sanctions for the public authorities that doesn't create a register of interactions. So we are somewhere in the middle of, yes, we are happy, like the colleague was saying, we are happy for something very good. We have a definition of what is representation of interests. We have a register. We will have a register. Things are moving, but we are afraid of this, not of the register of interactions not being centralized. So we'll see in the future, and we keep discussing along the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. Well, a balanced approach takes time, as we are seeing. After Portugal, the Republic of Italy, I pass the floor to Francesco Macchia.
Thank you very much. I must have something like 20 seconds, isn't it? I have to say that unfortunately we don't have any legislation yet. Still, as today, there is a really fragmented situation. Chamber of Deputies has its own regulation. The Senate has its own regulation. The Anti-Corruption National Authority has another one. So that's the situation as today. But what happened is that in January 2026, so this January, the Chamber of Deputies approved the so-called Pagano, from the first signer, bill on representation of interest, and that yesterday the Senate started the examination of the bill. So it seems that things are going. I don't know. I mean, it's too early to understand if we have almost 1 year more of legislature, so there's time to close up the path, but it's not sure as well. What is good is that the representation of interest is understood in the bill as a contribution to the formation of the public decision. This is something that is clear in the bill, and this is quite balanced, let's say. And there is also another thing that expresses a balanced vision, meaning that in the bill there are both obligation for the interested representative, but also right, like the right to participate, the right to interact, the right to submit, and so the right to interact with the public institution. The bill the core of the bill is on three items. One is a public register. That unfortunately is only for professional, but the problem is that it is only for professional. So it's take out the occasionally lobbyists, and this creates a kind of misleading because it's difficult to define what is occasional. The other stuff is that when the other point in the core, that is core is an agenda, the agenda of the meeting. That is good, but the obligation of keeping is only on the public interest, not on the map, on the member of the parliament, or whatever else. And the other issue is that the scope of application excludes something like trade unions, employers, organizations, so those create a different path for people that do almost the same work and the same job. So in this term, we are happy of this bill, but we will work during the Senate in order to change those 3 points that for us have to be changed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francesco. And we can discuss about point of view to get the business organizations and trade unions in the register. Laura, please, on behalf of Romania.
Right, so as Václav said, because of or due to the resilience plan and our path to exceeding OECD, we moved ahead with the regulation on lobbying, although it's not a regulation on lobbying. So we don't have a law on lobbying. There is no such word used, and we are happy about it. We used to have, since 10 years ago, a transparency register at the level of the government. It was underused, and only from time to time people was writing there something. So what happened is that not we, but Romanian parliament and government pushed for a new legislation because of these milestones, and now we have a transparency register at the level of the government and the parliament and the local, in theory at least, local governments, local administration. And it's still, what's good about it? So what's good about it is that it covers virtually everything except natural persons. meaning that you have freelancers which wouldn't have to register. That's a loophole, and maybe my fellow members of the board remember that we were about to notify OECD of this loophole, and then the lead negotiator kindly asked me not to do this because I was jeopardizing our accession. Okay, so we left it. And then another good thing is that the obligations, we have the obligation of register as third parties, we are called, but all the legislators, officials, need to register their interactions with us. So they have to register each interaction. Now that happens now, it's very closely observed at the level of the government, and at the level of the parliament. I think the obligation starts at the beginning of June, in fact, and I think they have to get their head around it, that they will have to do this because they hated it altogether, of course. So this is what we have. And it's not a great platform. It still has to be improved, okay, but it's something. And also, I will say this and I'm done, in November, we pushed for a law on revolving doors with a 12 months cooling off period. 12. And 12. And with fines if you don't comply.
Is it good? Are they compensated?
Compensated? No.
No, you shouldn't.
No.
You shouldn't. There's no obligation. Thank you very much. I see a lot of attention to interactions in this legislation. We really don't have more time, but I would like to ask very quick and interesting questions. I would like to start with Laura. You were speaking, and also with Diana. How are these changes, these laws, these initiatives, whether even if they're it's kind of early, how these changes are being perceived by the sector and by the government and by the society? Perhaps Laura can take the floor and how are they being perceived? Very quickly.
Well, obviously, as usual, the sector, the professionals, they're ready to comply, the companies, the multinationals, everyone. I was just checking now, the register has 65 entries. It's still a low number, but it's growing because they're getting accustomed of the fact that they need to do it. The government is complying, and in fact, they started not to. This is their obligation. They can't meet you, like in Brussels. They can't meet you if you're not there. Okay. But there you go. But the parliament, the members of the parliament, they just plainly hated it. And it was a struggle for the negotiators of OECD to get it through with the parliament.
Diana?
Very briefly, of course, the professional guild did welcome the fact that we finally have such regulation in place. However, there is a lot of rampant, actually, complaint about the fact that it's too arbitrarily interpreted, that all the provisions are really very vague, and there is room for distorting the market. So some of the things that the business is complaining about would be this lack of symmetry in the obligations from the interest representatives and, on the other side, the public institutions. But as we know, in criminal law, if an obligation is not supported by a sanction, then it doesn't have any legal weight. However, the government and the parliament, they are still grappling with this. There was a lot of controversy, and as bad decisions sometimes make good stories. The good story is that the minister who actually started the introduction of the act did publicly say that it needs a lot of refurbishment. And I'll stop here.
I would
the battle continues.
Thank you. I would like to ask Francesco and Gonzalo from Il Chiostro and PAPT, what was the role of your associations in the recent developments in your countries?
Well, I have to say very briefly that you have to know that we began to talk about legislation on representation of interest from 1998. At every legislation, the law seems to be worse than the previous one. So what we did, what we thought at the Chiostro at the beginning of this legislation is to promote a kind of support and promote the legislation. So we, in some way, we promote the Pagano Bill. The Pagano Bill is obviously a mediation, so it does not reflect at all our desiderata, but is at least, as I told you, balanced and much better than what we had in the previous aspect. For sure, we will have to work in the Senate part on the three aspects I told you before.
Thank you. In Portugal, we had a major role, especially in the previous versions of the law, trying to include everyone on the register. So in fact, in Portugal, everyone, even an individual that is going to represent his own interests because he wants to change any law, the noise law or whatever. So every individual must be registered to be in relation with any political decision maker. So companies, even if they hire a public affairs consultancy or if they have their lawyer or whatever, even companies need to be on the register. Lawyers, of course, they need to be on the register also. This was a major role of our association, trying to push that everyone would have to be included, and the national parliaments accepted this version, and they managed to be together. And right now, this working group inside the committee in the parliament that is facing small regulation issues, they called us several times to give feedback on everything that they are doing. And the next step, a few weeks, I think in a few weeks, we will be testing the platform, the register platform. We'll be the ones testing the platform and introducing some of our clients, some of our association, members of the association and so on, trying to test the register for real on a beta version. So yes, we are engaged, and we thank the Parliament for this, and the Parliament understands that we are the ones that need to give feedback to everyone, to everything. So I think it's fair. Thank you.
Gonzalo, did you succeed also on putting union and employees organization?
Yes. So in fact, the law mentioned unions are interest representations, so they need to register themselves. Yeah. But the Parliament decided that a few formal institutions that already exist, and for example, the Federation of Unions, they are registered. No, they are registered automatically. So the Parliament will register a few national entities, the ones that are most representative on the country, so the employers associations, the Federation of Unions, and so on, they are automatically registered, but they are included, yes.
Thank you. That's fantastic, so they cannot complain. My last question, and with this we are finished. So regulations is about impact, no? So I would like Václav and Dominic to answer to the question of how have those regulations have impacted your daily exercise as a lobbyist? Perhaps Václav and then Dominic, if you don't mind.
On practical level, we have to introduce an internal tracker of meetings for our consultants.
Wow.
And also, we keep track of the meetings of our clients, because it's the beginning of the regulations for them, and we have every 6 months to report it. So far we did first 6 months. So in January, technically, and that's what many NGOs say, you can put the meetings in the registry as they go, but no one is doing that. Everyone is waiting for the last week of the period. So those who were like in July will be reported in January, as well as those who were was in December. So we keep track, and then before the deadline, we talk to our client what should be put in the registry, what should not be put in the registry. Because it's not that because the law is about legislation. If you discuss the current legislation, that it's applicable. If you discuss European legislation, no, it's not. It doesn't fall into the scope. If you discuss public procurement, it doesn't fall into the scope. If you discuss sub-regulations, not. So you have to really distinguish what to put there. So basically keeping track and who, for example, if you are on the meeting with your client or with the client, that these are two separate registry entities, mine and the client's one. And yeah, and if there's a third party, they also have to report. So we have to align with them what should be put in the registry.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you, Václav. I can tell you we have the same issues in Germany. Be happy, we have much more complex in your system, and the bureaucratic burden is absolutely high. If you debate on every monthly or weekly basis with all teams, in all organizations, about documentation of budgeting, or the question of compliance, how you implement meetings still, every meeting in direct lobbying with your clients, with the German system, it's really, really complicated. And the budgeting, who is responsible for what kind of budget? So big issues, and coming to Germany, there spoke about sanctions. We have fines. We have law enforcement now in Germany regarding incorrect or misleading facts in the registration. And everybody knows we have fear of fines. This means this is not a kind of old debate, we do nothing or not. This is a clear regulation issue. And coming back, the most important point is to find with your clients the balance, what comes in and out, and looking to our European friends again. More important than in Germany, that's the implementation of our registration of lobbyists, is the debate how we include public advertising, this kind of campaigning issues. It's much more than political campaigning for advertisement in Germany. That is most important coming up, and we look forward. But at the end, transparency is important, and now back to you.
Thank you so much. So I hope you have now a clear view of your obligations if you ever operate in these countries. Thank you so much to all the panelists. Thank you for the apologies for pressing up with time. I'm just obeying orders from Jorge. And thank you so much, all of you, for your attention. We give the floor to the next panel. Thank you.
Tienes que pulsar ahí. Ahí está.
Hello, good morning. Respecting the schedule, we are a little bit delayed, so we will try to be more concise if possible, because our topic today is pretty interesting. It's one of the hot topics now in our profession. So during years, public affairs has been built around political intelligence, institutional relationships, strategic analysis, and contextual interpretation. But the question is not longer or whether artificial intelligence will impact the sector, because it already has, as we know. So we would like to know how it will change our world, and the tasks will become automatic, which capabilities will remain deeply human, and how we ensure that this transformation is responsible, useful, and also compatible with democratic quality. So to talk about this or enter into discussions about these topics, we have with us Enrique Marcos Collado, that works for SPAT, one of the companies that are developing artificial intelligence solutions for the professionals, so it's public affairs. We are in a context also very interesting because we know that the European Union also is an agent that regulates very well this, no? And also we have the Artificial Intelligence Act. So also the context propitiate as well these developments more than ever. So concerning your activity, how you are observing the real adoption of artificial intelligence with public affairs professionals, how are you seeing these transformations and how do you define the challenges that we have ahead?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Absolute pleasure to be here. I really don't deserve this room, I feel at this point, but yes, we're super happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation. In terms of the first question, I think it's really interesting. We've seen probably two different phases on what was, let's say, 2023, 2024, where everyone was saying, okay, we understood AI was relevant, it was important, but it didn't really have probably the legitimacy to be used internally in public affairs teams, right? So that was a bit of the idea. People were kind of using it scarcely on their own on ChatGPT, trying to put together a position paper, or now, okay, I'm going to try to analyze an amendment, or I'm going to try to create my position on this topic, right? But it was a bit even not well regarded internally, right? Like, how are these AI tools? Should we trust them? Should we not trust them? So that was a bit the idea. And I think now we've made a transition towards everyone really understanding AI is really relevant. It's going to shape a bit the future of public affairs and basically how we perform our day-to-day jobs as public affairs professionals. And we've seen big corporations and companies and consultancies and every actor in the field now trying to tailor AI to their specific workflows, which is, I think, what we've seen in this past year, where everyone is really trying to say, okay, how can I get AI to work for me on my specific day-to-day? So that hyper-tailoring, which we're seeing that is really yielding those results. So it's from the kind of non-understanding of AI and a bit of being skeptical of what it can bring to the profession to really trying to tailor that to what we do on a day-to-day basis. That's a bit how I see it and what I've seen speaking with hundreds of heads of public affairs across Europe.
Mm-hmm. In the previous discussion, we had listened to our colleagues in other countries. So how is being also the adoption of artificial intelligence tools and also standards in different countries, no? Because also in Europe, for example, France and Germany are being very proactive in sovereignty. Also in Spain, our colleagues participated in the presentation the last week of the study together with the University of Navarra that later will be also presented here. In Spain, for example, what we had seen is that the professionals still are not considering the artificial intelligence tools as a skills are something key, no, in the diary war. So how do you see that in different countries? How it's been the approach?
So I can speak for my experience in the EU, and I would say Cyril, my colleague here, he's done roadshows in France. We've been to Germany, to Spain, and I have to say, it's less about a cultural difference, and in fact, we've seen that Spain is really, really advanced, way more advanced than I thought, to be honest. People are really willing to adapt AI in their day-to-day. It's really like a high priority for Spanish consultancies, for Spanish corporate leaders, let's say, in the market, so I was really pleased to see that. And then in terms of how I'm seeing the difference, it's more about the organizational and individual organizational push that we see internally, more than anything that goes by market or by local regulation, etc., etc. It's more about how are you being pushed internally to adopt AI and how much room and weight are you being given by your internal, let's say, decision makers. It's more about that than like a Spanish regulation or the French regulation or investing more or less into AI. That's at least what I've seen. So more of an individual, let's say, cherry picking by different organizations, rather than a geographical, let's say, difference, basically.
Mm-hmm. And concerning the organizations, do you think that is also transforming how they are taking the decisions, especially in big companies, or how public affairs and artificial, sorry, I think that you can listen to me properly. How the adoptions and the transformation inside of the companies is affecting how they are taking decisions. It's helping for the analysis and also to the landscape.
Definitely, I think the difference here is basically trying to free up time from everything that is manual work, grunt work, and that is low value work, to put it one way. It's obviously useful. And trying to give more time for public affairs professionals to actually dedicate it to what moves the needle, to what makes a difference. So strengthening that relationship building, getting out there, going to more events, and making basically what makes humans different, which is not staying behind your screen for hours and hours analyzing amendments or analyzing a commission proposal or putting together an MEP briefing because your CEO is coming to town. So those are obviously useful tools, but if you can now get rid of that basically and spend that time building more relationships and trying to really move the needle and advocate for your priorities, I think that's basically what we're seeing and how AI is helping in this field at the moment.
So from your perspective in this context, are the human skills that will remain, especially for the professionals?
Exactly.
How to strengthen this as well and how to work as well with artificial intelligence to strengthen this?
Exactly, so that's basically what's going to stay, and I think, I don't know if we're going to discuss it later, but basically we're also going to see a bit of a shift from what juniors, public affairs professionals used to do on their day-to-day basis to what is going to be expected from a public affairs professional even early in their career nowadays, right? So they used to spend, and I've done it, I spent over 5 years in consulting in Brussels, I spent hundreds of hours watching committee meetings, waiting to see what they saw for 3-4 hours, etc., etc. So now it's going to be more about, okay, how can we actually give them the capacity to become more strategic and more analytical since the start of their careers, basically get more out there, build more relationships, and trying to bring that earlier in their career to the firms or even to their corporate, let's say, company, to their organization, and learn more about checking what AI is putting together, making sure that is good to go, and that is adding value to your company, but also bringing earlier that more strategic advice layer to a career, basically.
Mm-hmm. And for example, as I mentioned before, to change the strategic direction in companies, no, they taking decisions, or so now you can analyze much more data. You have much information faster, and this. So I think that also is transforming the processes on the sense.
Exactly. In fact, I think in terms of AI, where we stand right now is more exactly on the layer that you're mentioning. So AI is really good at aggregating data, and then you can question those data sets, right? We haven't really reached the point where we can actually infer, or AI can really understand all of the intangibles in the room and can get like social situations in there. So it's a bit more of that data analytics side of things. That's bringing a lot of capacity, obviously, to companies to make both internal decisions and advocate and take positions way quicker through analyzing that data. And then the next layer is going to be in the next, I don't have the crystal ball, but let's say 3 to 5 years, more of that AGI, where we really see how AI is becoming a bit more human, if we want to put it. So yeah, it's definitely helping a lot.
Do you have concrete examples of companies that, or also consultancies that have transformed their business model?
Absolutely, absolutely. We work, for example, with a Danish company, with Danfoss, which basically, I think they used to take 2 weeks, I think it was, to, for example, that's what they told us, to take a decision or to make an impact assessment, and that's been reduced to literally 1 day. So they receive something in the morning, then in the next couple of hours they have maybe a junior person in their team have it analyzed, write it through AI, through an AI platform basically, and then they can make a decision by end of day of okay, this is our position, it's read all of our position papers on this issue, it's analyzed X, Y, or Z, and then you manage to, in a day, get rid of that, and you get way quicker to advocate and to really try to move the needle, which is what you should be looking forward to add value to your organization, right? Instead of spending 2-3 weeks trying to put everything together.
Mm-hmm. There is another important angle in this ecosystem of the public affairs, that is the public administration, obviously, how they are adopting as well the artificial intelligence to offer more transparency and also to be more democratic and offers tools to the citizens. Mm-hmm. I was thinking, for example, in the better regulation of the European Commission, they had the website Had Your Say, for example, for the public consultancies. And it's a good tool, no? But maybe we can go far away and how it's been adopted in other institutions.
I think that's a really good example, and in fact, it's probably going to be one of those first interactions of institutions with AI. The public consultations, basically, it's aggregating hundreds and thousands of answers, and for the civil servant, instead of literally being unable to do it because they don't have physical time to do it, maybe through a few hours being able to analyze what are the key positions, what have been said by X type of stakeholders or by Belgian stakeholders or by Spanish stakeholders, etc. So that's going to come really quickly. But I think for me the issue here, and what I see, at least what I feel in Brussels, I don't know how it's at the national level, is that we have conversations with them, of course. They don't have that many incentives to actually become more efficient on their day-to-day as a corporate organization would or as a consultancy would, right? So unless there is a big push from, let's say, the upper echelons of the organization or their company, it's difficult for them to actually adopt this because it needs to be a really wide organizational and institutional adoption of AI. So we're seeing it's lagging a bit more and struggling to do it, but that's a bit how I see it in tools like public consultations and really aggregating big data sets to put together basically quicker impact assessments, for example.
And for example, for the policy making evidence, do you have also examples of how doing artificial intelligence is using for that?
So that it's the one basically I shared. I think that's the one that I'm aware of in Brussels, and it's basically using this have your say. I guess we have the same thing all around Europe. Basically, public consultations before and after the publication of a commission proposal. They're basically going through, instead of spending hundreds of hours going through 400, 500 answers, they basically pull the data from there and understand, okay, these were the 2-3 positions that were mentioned the most. So they guess and they recommend to their policy officers or to the head of unit of the commission, okay, we need to take these 4 or 5 meetings because it's the position that has been taken the most, basically. That's a bit of the idea.
Also, developments are being faster sometimes that we expect it, and also how we can adopt these developments. So there are other important concerns as ethics, and it's going to foster the democracy, and also there will be people or sectors that will left behind. So how we should approach this tomorrow? There is also a workshop focused on ethics and artificial intelligence organized in this forum. So how we can approach this perspective, this angle?
I think for me on this one, what I felt, so our company basically starts also from and mimicking a bit what we've seen in the legal sector. So there's a couple of companies called Harvey and Legora, basically, which are huge now. They're unicorns, valued in, I think, 11 billion or something like that. And that's what we try to bring. But what we realized is that, for example, on the public affairs side of things, nobody has really taken the time to create personalized AI tools internally. So the public affairs teams in organizations and in consultancies are not really being given the right tools to work. So all of that legitimacy that you're talking about, transparency and ethics, nobody has really been thinking about it, right? They have created generalist tools or they have created for other sectors, but nobody has really thought about public affairs. So it's a bit more difficult to grant that legitimacy and think about all of the whole ethics and how do we treat them when nobody has really sat together and put together a specific tool internally that really tries to pursue those objectives, let's say, and those goals.
What do you consider as the challenge for the next 2 years? Because if I would say 5, I think that is too much.
I think even 6 months with the pace at which AI advances, it's absolutely crazy how it changes, basically. I think challenges, for me, the one I'm the most concerned and that I've seen when I'm speaking with a lot of senior people in this sector, let's say, it's the junior side of things. They're all really worried about, okay, how do we train them to become that senior public affairs professional? What do I do with an organization that I already have 40, 50, 60 juniors in, for example? How do I make that switch? How do I make AI work for them? How do I make it more efficient? So I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. It's going to be how do we grow that base of public affairs professionals that is now, let's say, AI native and that is going to have to live with AI to bring them and to grow them in the next 5, 10 years. And that's one of the biggest challenges, let's say.
And also for the senior professionals, we are here also some senior professionals. We are adopting the tools as well, but do you think that there are other challenges that maybe is how to take advantage, right, of this?
I mean, I think, and I always say, a senior professional, a senior public affairs professional that adopts AI is the most powerful tool there is, obviously, nowadays. And I don't think there's a generational breach or let's say, a block in there. It's just more of a personal decision by the professional to say, okay, I really want to adopt this, or I really don't want to adopt this, I don't want to put in the time. But obviously, a senior public affairs professional, with all of the experience it has, all of that strategic layer, and bringing that critical thinking to all of the outputs from AI, brings way more value than a junior, right? So it's more about being willing to do it.
Okay, so I think that that we can consider how we are going to take advantage of this to build more strategic vision, I think. The core of public affairs will be trust, basically, and will continue being trust. So I think that this is an important conclusion.
Exactly. I think that let's say the policy, the politics are not going to be made by AI, right? I don't think that's where we're going. And in the end, politicians want to pick up the phone and speak with the public affairs professional that they've been speaking with for the past 10, 15 years, that they trust. We trust people. We don't trust a machine, right, for the end of policy making. It's just about making those 3-4 steps beforehand way more efficient. And being able to achieve that better regulation that you were mentioning, right, that we've heard in Europe for a lot of years, and we're still a bit waiting to see how it materializes. But yeah, that nature of policymaking, of picking up the phone, of reading the room, I don't think that's going to change, and that's not going anywhere anytime soon, basically.
So I don't know if there are people in the audience interested in launch on questions.
Question.
Can I ask? Sorry.
I think that, I don't know if you continue and we'll go.
Oh, ladies first.
Thank you. So just maybe 2 comments. First, indeed, we are worried about the young professionals, the very young professionals, the very junior ones. We have seen this in our firm as well. I mean, suddenly we are not hiring the very junior ones, and we have moved a bit, you know, we are looking at people with 2-3 years at least experience, so not very junior. But the second one is that you just said that we are not still there where policies are written or designed by AI. Well, I beg to differ. We see in Romania, a motion of non-confidence and pieces of legislation written entirely by AI. Okay, so, and that's where policy starts, and then from there, obviously, you still have negotiations and discussions and debates, whatever, but when they start more and more with pieces of legislation and other policies written by AI.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your experience on this.
I mean, I would say just a really quick comment, also conscious of time. I think that's really worrying, and I think we should definitely have a specific regulation on how governments and institutions should use AI, basically.
Yeah.
They use it with open sources. I mean, free ChatGPT.
Yeah, DeepSeek sending it to China. Yeah.
Absolutely. We had another question there.
Yes, thank you. One comment and one question. On that first one, I totally agree on the risk. And I think that's something not specific for the public affairs sector. We have started an initiative in Netherlands together with people from Edelman, who many of you might know, because we see it in the whole services sector, whether you're accountant, whether you're a communications professional, PR agency, public affairs. The initiative is called The First Rung, because it's about this first step you take in your career. And we try to see what solutions we can develop for either companies, whether in which sector you are in the services economy, how you can still manage to train young people to become a professional when part of their world is being taken by AI. That's just a comment. An interesting question. It's on my mind for several months now. I'm also following every development on AI and how it's impacting our work. I'm also curious on maybe if you can share some of your insights, how this AI will develop in the interpersonal relations between lobbyists and policymakers. Let's say, what if policymakers will start using AI more and more? In the Netherlands, we have a parliament with a very small, relatively small parliament, very understaffed. So what we see is that already parliamentarians are using AI more and more as like a personal assistant. So we've seen the first motions, amendments being drafted by AI. In Albania, they have an AI minister who is kind of like with the idea, I think it's an experiment. I don't know enough on it. I'm very keen to learn from it, but it's seen as somebody who's very neutral. I'm care to have your vision on that, because I want to learn from it.
It's very interesting that you had shared, because before you can answer, Enrique, I think that also the quality is being leveraged, no? For the policymakers and also for the professionals. Because when you had so many information available, the added value of the content that you had to share and your perspectives is more qualified as well, I think. No, I think that maybe it's a fact.
Yeah, but I think for me the answer is a bit the same one that I gave to our Romanian colleague. It's just that needs to be regulated, because it doesn't make any sense that we have AI making laws basically without a proper regulation and without proper guidelines, safeguards, benchmarks of what should be included in a platform, what shouldn't be included in a platform, etc., etc. Once that is regulated, then I'm not against that, and I think it can actually bring efficiencies.
What if I'm that MP and I don't want to speak to the representatives of Telefonica or Vodafone or Repsol? I'll just look up on AI what they might think of my initiative or my amendment of my motion. And also, who's controlling the AI? That's another question.
I mean, I think my personal opinion on that is that you wouldn't be doing your job properly, basically. That's not how you should behave as a politician, right? You need to listen to all of the stakeholders. And then running out of time, sorry.
It's very interesting.
I'm seeing Jorge suffering.
It's a very interesting discussion, I have to say, yeah. Yes, of course.
Just adding, just for the confusion, also we just had in Portugal the situation that the contributions that you can make to the legislative process, usually you can send a PDF with your comments on the law or whatever. And recently we just had someone that incited some young people to send their contributions. Very nice. But you know what happened? 1,000 contributions made on ChatGPT sent it to the parliament, to this legislative process. So in fact, you had 1,000 contributions that you need to read. And it was just, okay, put on ChatGPT, give me an opinion about this law. ChatGPT gave it, they put it on email and they send it. And you know what happened on the other side? So no, they put the 1,000 contributions on the ChatGPT and say, make me a summary of this. And so we are, circulating, we are in a loop of contributions. So we need to find the right moment to use it. Thank you.
It's a good point. So the human factor still remains, crucial. This is true. There are thousands of civil servants in the European Commission as well, evaluating funding programs, and these, are in the same situations as well. So, from this perspective, I think that the point has to be focused in the human factor and also in the quality. I think, for me, this could be one of the main conclusions, and also that the tools, of course, are very important to improve our work and also the quality of the democracy and the work of the public administration and the whole ecosystem of the institutional relations and public affairs. So thank you, Enrique, for being so generous with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Debate interesante.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, a quick thank you to PACE and APRI, and of course the Senate also for hosting. I'll keep my intervention very quickly, also under a minute and a half, just to give enough lead time to my colleagues here to discuss about the key findings of the report. They were very well written. So basically, we're gonna focus on giving an X-ray of the public affairs sector in Spain. The study that they will be presenting in a minute was developed by the University of Navarra, of course, and driven by the Forum of Organizations of APRI, which is composed of 30 organizations from all different type of sectors that are, of course, very committed to transparent dialogue about our sector in the country specifically. As the largest and most comprehensive research conducted until today on our profession in the country, this report does really give solid and groundbreaking data at a time in which we see every day more that the sector is really consolidating in the country since a few years ago. So to reveal the key findings, I'm joined by the two minds behind this report. I'll start with Natalia Rodriguez Salcedo, PhD and leading researcher in corporate communication. She's the Deputy Director of the Marketing and Media Management Department and the Academic Coordinator for the minor in corporate communication, also professor at the Public Affairs undergraduate. And Ángel Arrese, Professor of Journalism at the School of Communication. He's Deputy Director of the Department of Marketing and Media Management, previously served as Dean of the School and Director of the PhD program. So Natalia and Ángel, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your introduction and the kind invitation. It is an honor to be here today in the Spanish Senate with such a distinguished audience. In the early days of navigation, maps were often filled with blank spaces, unknown territories, uncharted waters, areas marked with warnings, myths, or simply the words "Hic sunt dragones," here be dragons. And in many ways, the Spanish public affairs sector has navigated a similar landscape for decades. We have operated through political transitions, regulatory complexity, institutional change, and European integration. We have built a profession that plays an increasingly important role in democratic governance. We speak constantly about lobbying, its influence, its power, its risks, its democratic role. We have assumptions, we have impressions, and yet, despite all that, we actually know surprisingly little about the people who professionally inhabit that world, who they are, how they work, what they believe, what kind of profession this has become. And that is precisely why the University of Navarra and APRI created the Public Affairs Observatory 1 year ago. And this study is one of the first results of that collaboration. Today, my fellow researchers and I do not bring you a discovery, but an attempt to draw a more accurate map, not of territories, but of our profession. So let me briefly show you the route we will follow today. We will begin with the broader democratic context surrounding lobbying and public affairs in Spain and Europe. Then we will move into the methodology of the study itself, and from there the map begins to reveal its details. Who works in public affairs, where they come from, how the profession evolves across age, gender, and organizational environments, what concerns professionals most, and perhaps most importantly, how the sector perceives itself. At the moment, or at a moment when public affairs is becoming more influential, but also more exposed to public scrutiny than ever before. And finally, we will end not simply with conclusions, but with a reflection about where the profession may be heading in Spain. Because this study is not only descriptive, it also reflects a profession in transition, a profession that is becoming more visible, more strategic, and perhaps inevitably more politically relevant. Let me begin with a simple idea. This is not just a study about a profession, it is also about how democracies organize the relationship between institutions and society. If you read the newspapers today, we we are very trendy. Lobby is trendy today in Spanish media. Modern democracies have become extraordinarily complex systems. Legislation is more technical, regulation is more interconnected, decision-making increasingly operates simultaneously at local, national, and European levels. And under those conditions, institutions cannot govern in isolation. They require expertise, they require information, they require dialogue with organized society. And this is precisely where public affairs emerges. Not as something external to democracy, but as one of the mechanisms through which democratic systems actually function. And yet, paradoxically, lobbying continues to generate enormous public suspicion, which creates one of the central tensions of the profession today. High institutional relevance combined with incomplete social legitimacy. And in many ways, that tension runs throughout our study. This slide summarizes visually the central democratic logic behind the profession. If you look at the left side of the slide, the first thing you see is context, loss of trust in institutions, polarization, disinformation, technological disruption, geopolitical uncertainty. We all know this. In other words, policymaking today takes place under permanent pressure. At the same time, the right side of the slide introduces another key idea. Modern policymaking has become very technical. Artificial intelligence, energy transition, digital regulation, healthcare defense, sustainability. These are not policy areas that governments can navigate alone, not at all. Legislators and public officials increasingly depend on specialized expertise. And that is precisely where public affairs enters the picture. The slide also illustrates an important balance. On the one hand, lobbyists provide expert information. On the other, democratic quality depends on transparency, integrity, and institutional safeguards. That balance is essential because the real democratic question is not whether lobbying exists. Lobbying exists in every complex democracy. The real question is under what rules, with what transparency, and with what professional standards. And perhaps one of the most important ideas here is public affairs should not automatically be interpreted as a distortion of democracy. Under appropriate ethical conditions, it is actually part of how pluralist democracies function. And this brings us directly to the Spanish case, because Spain presents a fascinating paradox. On the one hand, public affairs has experienced enormous professional growth. Spain is currently one of the countries with the largest representation in the European Union Transparency Register. More than 1,000 Spanish organizations already are registered in Brussels, which makes perfect sense because more than half of Spanish legislation comes from Europe. In other words, public affairs in Spain is no longer purely national. It is increasingly European. But at the same time, Spain still lacks a comprehensive national lobbying law. So the map reveals something quite striking: strong professionalization combined with relatively weak institutional regulation. And I suspect many people in this room recognize that contradiction immediately. When we compare Spain with other European countries, another interesting pattern emerges. Despite national differences, Europe as a whole is moving toward a normalization of public affairs. Across the continent, professionals are becoming more specialized, more educated, more institutionalized, and increasingly subject to ethical frameworks and transparency in standards. The debate is no longer really about whether public affairs should exist. The debate is over. The real debate now concerns how it should be regulated, how transparent it should become, and how democratic legitimacy can be strengthened. And in that sense, Spain is not an exception. It is part of a broader European transformation. We have our Bulgaria needs an update after, okay. So, Angel?
Well, let me now, also Romania. Thank you, Natalia. Let me now turn to how we actually conducted the study. Just a couple of things about the structure of the study, the objectives, and the main technical issues. Our general objective was to build a comprehensive profile of public affairs and lobby professionals in Spain. We organized that study around 5 blocks of questions, many of them following the literary review we made in the first part of the report. The first block was the academic and professional profiles, backgrounds, career paths, competencies, pay, etc. Second, career trajectories and employment status, experience, seniority, job satisfaction, and so on. Third, the organizational environment, what kinds of organizations, which sectors, what geographical scope had the professionals in their organizations. The fourth block was about roles, practices, and skills, how the day-to-day tools and channels are used in the day-to-day work of professionals. And 5, at least for me the most interesting, was about perceptions, challenges, and attitudes, how professionals see their own profession, its regulation, and its public image. That was the structure of the study. Just a few words on the method, briefly. You have in the slide the technical characteristics, but I would like to highlight some key issues. This is a quantitative, descriptive, and exploratory study, a cross-sectional study, say the technicians. We use a self-administered online survey. Our target population was lobbying and public affairs professionals in Spain. It's what researchers usually call a hard-to-reach population. In fact, it's an unknown population, because in Spain we don't have a register, we don't have a sample or population framework, so we have to think that we are trying to reach a representation of the universe, but we don't know the universe. So that's the reason, because we use a purposive sampling, snowball sampling, starting from a seed list of 280 members of the APRI, and following a snowball process. Of course, it was a non-probabilistic sample. The result was impressive for us. I have made some professional surveys, and it's very complicated to reach many of them, and especially to get the answers. And we had 331 completed questionnaires from 5,010 that were started. Almost 65% of those who started the questionnaire complete the questionnaire. We had some estimations about the active population of professionals in Spain, but there are very different numbers, data, between 1,000 and 3,000. So it could be around 10% or 20% of the universe, but we don't know the universe. And if this was a probabilistic sample, it could be fine. It would have a plus minus 5% of error and 95% of confidence, but it's not a probabilistic sample. So we test a lot of the robustness of the sample, doing several checks, triangulation of checks of different waves of the snowball sampling, comparing the final sample with those who started the questionnaire, even comparing with partial data we had about the basic socio-demographic characteristics in other studies. So we got a very consistent and robust sample, and we are happy with that. The fieldwork took place in autumn 2025. The questionnaire had 40 questions, some open, the majority of them closed, and it took respondents about 15 minutes to complete the questionnaire. So this is a solid, careful built picture, and I think we could say that the result is a high-quality portrait of the professionals in Spain. The presentation of the results in the report is organized in 2 parts. The report, I think you can access it online, I suppose, because it's open. The report is organized in 2 parts. In the first part, we've described the main characteristics of professional profile, following the 5 blocks I have mentioned. And in the second, we carry out some statistical analysis and hypothesis testing activities, comparing proportions and means, to examine the extent to which certain socio-demographic variables, job position characteristics, type of organizations, gender, etc., are statistically significant when associating them with some behaviors, attitudes, and perceptions about the profession. So this is the content, the structure of the report, and now Natalia will show the main results.
Thank you, Angel.
Very briefly.
Okay, so let's move to people, from profession to people. This slide acts almost as a doorway, and this is where our map begins to take human shape instead of dragons. And I have to say, one of the most interesting aspects of our study is how strongly the data contradicts many public stereotypes. What emerges is a profession that is far more structured, qualified, and self-aware than many people assume. This is not a simply portrait of influence, but a portrait of a professional ecosystem. Let us begin with the most basic profile of the profession. And actually, the first figures already challenge several stereotypes. If you look at the age distribution in the center of the slide, this is not an aging profession. The average age is around 42. The largest group is concentrated between 25 and 44 years old. In other words, this is a relatively young professional ecosystem, but already mature enough to occupy strategic institutional positions. The gender distribution is also interesting. The profession remains predominantly male, but the gap is considerably smaller than in several other European countries. And then there is the map, or perhaps more accurately, the gravitational center. More than 3 out of 4 professionals in the sample are based in Madrid. The visual concentration on the slide is almost overwhelming, which tells us something important about how institutional power still operates in Spain. Political centralization continues to shape professional geography. Where political decision-making concentrates, then institutional dialogue concentrates as well. And finally, although the profession is gradually becoming more international, it remains overwhelmingly Spanish in composition. So despite globalization and Europeanization, this is still a very national-rooted ecosystem. Now, this slide dismantles several stereotypes again, almost immediately. The numbers are visually impossible to ignore. Public affairs professionals are extraordinarily educated. Virtually all respondents hold university degrees. 9 out of 10 have postgraduate qualifications. However, the map also reveals an interesting gap. Despite these high levels of education, more than half report lacking specialized formal training in public affairs itself, and 61% demand further training. That creates an interesting paradox. A highly educated profession that still perceives itself as under-specialized. And the areas where professionals demand further expertise are legislative processes, strategic communication, and lobbying techniques. In other words, professionals increasingly perceive public affairs not simply as networking, but as a complex, interdisciplinary practice requiring continuous learning. That tells us something important and very positive about the maturity of the sector. It is not becoming more casual, but rather more demanding. And also here, I believe we universities should play a growing role in that transformation. Another striking characteristic is seniority. More than 1/3 of respondents occupy director-level positions, and more than a quarter report salaries above 80,000 euros annually. Another revealing figure is this: nearly 3 out of 4 enter public affairs after careers in other sectors, business, public administration, politics, media, even consultancy. So this is not typically a first profession. It is often a second professional destination, which reinforces the idea that public affairs increasingly appears not as an entry-level occupation, but as a destination reached after institutional experience accumulates, which And perhaps that makes sense, because this profession depends heavily on understanding institution, reading political environments, interpreting regulation, and managing complex relationships. So experience matters. Institutional memory matters. Strategic judgment matters. The employment ecosystem itself, it's quite balanced. Roughly 1/3 work in corporation, another third work in consultancy firms, and more than half operate in highly regulated sectors, health, energy, finance, and food, which reveals something fundamental. The more regulation matters, the more strategic institutional dialogue becomes. 96% believe the relevance of public affairs will remain stable or increase in the coming years. That is an extraordinarily high level of confidence in the future of the profession. And frankly, after seeing the complexity of today's policymaking processes, it is difficult to disagree. So what does public affairs actually look like in practice on a daily basis? Interestingly, despite technological transformation, the profession remains profoundly relational. Direct engagement with public officials remains the central activity. Formal meetings remain the primary communication channel, and strategic thinking is identified as the profession's most important competency. However, artificial intelligence and digital transformation still appear as secondary concerns. Instead, the dominant concern is reputation, public perception, social legitimacy. This might be one of the areas where the compass may still need recalibration in the map. Because while trust and human relationships remain central, technology is transforming policymaking faster than many sectors realize. And here we arrive at maybe one of the most fascinating findings in the entire study. Internally, the profession displays extremely strong legitimacy. Respondents overwhelmingly believe public affairs contributes positively to democratic governance. The democratic value score reaches 6.7 out of 7. That is extraordinarily high. But at exactly the same time, transparency receives the lowest score, only 3.9. And suddenly the central paradox of the map becomes visible, our dragon. Internally, the profession feels consolidated. Externally, it still feels misunderstood. Many respondents report regularly needing to explain or defend their profession. And this tension between institutional maturity and incomplete public legitimacy defines the correct moment of public affairs in Spain better than anything else. In light of yesterday's events, the negative public sentiment towards lobbying aligns with our data, underscoring a clear demand for a legal and transparent framework. At this point, we wanted to look deeper. In this map, does the compass point in the same direction for everyone? The final analytical section explored whether there were major differences inside the profession itself. And the answer is no, or really not many, or not that many. One of the most remarkable findings concerned gender equality. The estimated gender pay gap is only 1.6. In Spain, that is genuinely significant. We also observe that women consistently report higher levels of ethical concern and ethical sensitivity. Age changes the map quite dramatically. Younger professionals are heavily concentrated in consultancy firms, while senior professionals increasingly move toward in-house corporate roles. And salaries rise very significantly with seniority, which confirms something many people in this room know from experience. In public affairs, trust and institutional credibility are accumulated and acknowledged slowly over time. Another particularly reassuring finding is that ethical concern does not decrease with power or experience. It actually increases. As professionals gain institutional responsibility, their ethical sensitivity deepens rather than fades. And honestly, we think that finding deserves attention because it suggests that ethical reflection is not external to the profession. It increasingly becomes part of the profession or the professional maturity itself. Mid-career professionals report the highest level of satisfaction, while younger professionals show the lowest, which perhaps shouldn't surprise us too much. This slide, this slide reveals three rather distinct professional realities, different organizational worlds inside the same profession. Private companies tend to concentrate higher salaries. Consultancies show a far more polarized structure with younger professionals in lower salary brackets, and other organizations occupy a more intermediate position. So although we often speak about the public affairs profession as a single universe, in practice, there are different organizational ecosystems out there. Different organizational environments produce different perceptions of the profession itself. Professionals working in private companies tend to hold a more positive assessment of lobbying's democratic role and ethical standards. Consultants, by contrast, are generally more critical regarding transparency and public image, which may be understandable because consultants are often more exposed to reputational pressure, client expectations, and public scrutiny. So their perspective on the profession can become slightly more skeptical and perhaps also more realistic about its communication challenges, which remind us that public affairs is not one single culture, but an ecosystem of different perspectives. Responsibility and ethical awareness tend to grow together. Professional position also matters. Senior managers report the highest level of satisfactions, while consultants report the lowest. Managers also display the highest level of ethical awareness, and again, we think this is an important pattern because it suggests that seniority and institutional responsibility tend to reinforce ethical reflection, not weaken it. And finally, senior managers also express the strongest belief in the democratic usefulness of public affairs, becoming ambassadors of the profession. They are generally more comfortable with the term lobbyist and more likely to reject negative stereotypes surrounding the profession. And this provides a valuable insight. The closer professionals are to strategic decision-making, the more clearly they perceive public affairs as a normal component of democratic governance, rather than as an anomalous activity. So after drawing the map, the obvious question becomes, where should the compass point now? Our research suggests 5 priorities. First, the profession must address what the study itself reveals as a significant transparency gap. On a scale from 1 to 7, the statement, the lobbying sector operates with a sufficient level of transparency, received only 3.9. In other words, the demand for greater transparency is no longer coming only from outside the profession, it is increasingly coming from within. Second, Spain needs a clearer and more coherent legal framework, not to constrain public affairs, but to normalize it, and as what it already is, a structural part of democratic governance. Third, the sector must continue investing in specialized education and professional development, because this is no longer an improvised profession, but rather a more technical, strategic, and interdisciplinary profession. Fourth, public affairs must adapt to technological transformation and artificial intelligence. Not because technology will replace political judgment, it will not, but because it is already reshaping how information, influence, and institutional access circulate. And finally, perhaps most importantly, the profession must learn to explain itself better. Because one of the central problems identified by this study is not only what lobbying is, is what citizens believe lobbying is. And now, a closing thought of this report. In all maps, dragons appear wherever knowledge ended. For many years, public affairs in Spain occupied one of those uncertain territories, highly influential but poorly understood. This report is an attempt to make that landscape visible, because the future of this profession depends not only on influence, but on understanding. For years, the sector evolved faster than our collective understanding of it. We knew it was growing, but we still lacked a shared map. And that is why an observatory is so important. Professions mature when experience is tested against knowledge and evidence. When we become capable not only of defending our value, but of understanding ourselves better. This study is certainly not a final map. Much remains to be explored, but it may offer a clearer picture of where the profession stands today and a better sense of where we're heading. Thank you very much.
Thank you both very much. And in sake of time, let's move to the next table. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you're enjoying the event. My name is Juan Herrero, representing APRI today. I want to thank PACE for being here with us. I mean, it's the PACE annual conference, obviously, and we organize this event with a lot of effort. And I want to thank Jorge and the whole APRI team for organizing the event and the whole program for today. Today, right now, after a very interesting panel presenting the report together with the University of Navarra, I think we can conclude the session because Natalia already mentioned most of the things that we were going to introduce now. But now, seriously, we want to dig in a bit more in what the report has shown. I think we agree with the recommendations of the report. Together with me in the panel is Maria Benito. Maria Benito holds a degree in psychology from the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid and a master's degree in coaching. After working many years in Saligeri Conde, one of the main headhunters in Spain, she joined last year Sarah Marlex, and she's focused and specialized in looking for C-level positions. So if you're interested in a C-level position, go to Maria. Luis Bouza is Associate Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid and also at the College of Europe in Bruges. He's Vice Dean for Research at the Faculty of Law, and most important, he also holds a PhD, but he's co-director of the Public Affairs Program diploma that we have with the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. And last but not least, David Cordova. David has two hats, but today with us, he's president, editor, and founder of Democrata. Democrata is the first media outlet specialized in parliamentary affairs in Spain. Thank you, David. And David also, in his other hat, is president of Vinces Public Affairs Consultancy here in Madrid. David studied journalism and political science and also philosophy. I mean, David has an amazing background. Thank you, David, for being with us. And as we are running a bit late, let me start and get to the point. And I start with posing a very quick question, quick introduction round. So according to you, what is the main challenge that public affairs is facing nowadays? We will start from Maria towards David, and then we can build from there.
Well, thank you for, first of all, thank you for having me in this Congress. Thank you very much, Jorge, for inviting me. From my perspective, we face two main challenges. The first one is the need to professionalize and regulate the sector, and the second one is the need to change the organization mindset in order to view public affairs roles as strategic.
Luis, please.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to be here. You are my object of study. I'm a bit of the outsider looking in. Now, seriously, I think the big challenge for years, political scientists have looked at the reality, for years, not for decades, using the rational choice perspective, right? Basically assuming that decision makers are guided by very clear incentives and so on. Now, this is not untrue, but we are living in an uncertain world now. I know that Charles Powell is going to address that. The key issue, I think, is how to train people that have this human dimension that has been mentioned in the previous tables in a much more uncertain political world in a disrupted public sphere. And I think that this is the big challenge, both strategically, but also in terms of what this profession can contribute to the future of democracy.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks to APRI, thanks to the Senate to invite me to take part in this discussion on behalf of Democrata and also of Vinces, of course. Let me say that I think we are living a unique moment. I think we are living a unique moment because social media, civil society, public institutions, I think we are living in a moment where democracy is the big question. So let me say that for me, this summit, or this discussion, is not only about the profession, it's overall about democracy, about our democracy. So I think, in that case, or in that framework, I think the main challenge that we have, or that you have as a profession, is the social legitimacy of the profession. I think public affairs is essential. It's essential for companies. It's essential for the civil society. It's essential for the institutions, no? In order to participate in the public decision making. And for that reason, I think we have to see the profession like a tool, like an instrument to promote and to defend our democracy. And I don't know if the profession at this moment, the perception of the profession is like this, no? Is actually, you think the people think the public affairs profession is a tool to defend or to guarantee our democracy? So for me, this is the challenge.
I mean, David, what a challenge. If that's what we need to address, that's a huge challenge, and we will probably we will talk about it later. So like a summary would be professionalization of the sector, having professionals well-trained, and getting back to Susana's and Enrique's table, the impact of artificial intelligence. So starting with the professionalization of the sector, and I want Maria to answer, but please, the rest, feel free, and let me know if you want also to contribute. According to what Natalia said before, is public affairs a profession where you land, or is a vocational one? And do you see a greater professionalization in the sector in the last years?
In my professional experience, public affairs is a landing profession in corporations. The average age for senior position is 41, 42 years old. But it doesn't mean that we don't have junior people in the sector. For sure we have. But consultancy firms are where young people usually have the first exposure to the sector. And we have a big challenge here because consultancy firms are the university for this young talent. They stay there for 3, 4, 5 years, and then they move on to another project, normally in corporations. So we have made progress in professionalizing the sector and trying to develop programs, but we have still a long way to go.
Luis, I see you want to...
I just want to add one sentence, and because I'm teaching at the Faculty of Law, and I know that the profession has different relations with lawyers in Europe, right? And but in Spain, I teach at the Faculty of Law, but I'm not a lawyer. In Spain, law is like a black hole in physics. Basically, it is such a strong gravitational force that it attracts everything, right? So basically, I would say the profession, at least in Spain, but probably in other countries as well, will be fully institutionalized, recognized, and stabilized whenever I can convince one of my law students that this has a future and that he or she doesn't need to do the master's to become a lawyer, right? That this has a future and it will be as recognized as that. Now, I don't think we are there still, but this is probably the horizon where we need to be thinking. This is the kind of institutional recognition. It is tied to the future. How long will I stay in this sector?
I think many consultancies here would agree with Maria that retaining talent is one of the main challenges for consultancies. I work for a company. I see the challenge because obviously when I'm looking for professionals, as Maria said, consultancies are a great university, and the problem is
you're the best university.
But the problem is that we companies tend to pay better than the consultancies. I say in general terms because that's not always the case, but in general terms, and that's the case, and we need to see how those tensions can be solved. And I don't want to be too controversial, but and digging in a bit more, is public affairs a stable profession? Meaning once you enter, do people stay in the sector? And I think we have nice findings in the report that once you land in the sector, then you stay in the sector for a long time. And are those professionals highly considered within the organization? I want to believe yes, because I want to believe that I'm highly considered. But what is your experience?
You are highly considered, and you know. Well, I would say that public affairs is a stable profession. In general, what changes over the time is the level of responsibility. In lower positions, technical knowledge are a value, and once you have this kind of skills, you move on more strategic position. Yes, it's a valued position within corporations, and several professionals in this field are actually occupying seats on the boards. But if we talk about salary, sometimes it doesn't match the level of responsibility. But I have to say that it's a common topic among all professionals in all kinds of industries. So everybody complains about salary. Who doesn't complain about salary? So it's a bit controversial because in consultancy firms, salaries are lower than in corporation. That's true, but there are more young people. So it's not conclusion. It's not a big conclusion.
And David, because I saw you like kind of disagreeing with me, so I give you the chance to polemize. I don't know how you say it.
I not disagree. I think the challenge that the profession has at this moment is that, which is the difference between public affairs profession and corporate affairs profession.
Yeah.
I think this is the challenge, no? Because as you see, many people or many companies are organizing their structure, thinking on the head of the activities, the corporate affairs department. They have people from the public affairs, from the communication affairs, etc. No? So I think the challenge is specifically how we define which is the profession of public affairs. I'm provocating, no? But I think it could be useful for the discussion. No? And many companies ask us, no? and sometimes, what do you think is better? Do you think the public affairs is better than communications or corporate affairs? Always I say that this is, we cannot compromise. We cannot do that. I think we have to think in the people, we have to think in the activity of the company, et cetera, no? And for me, the main thing is the person who has to lead this department. Maybe it could be the person from communication department, maybe from the public affairs. So the issue is not that, but we have to be clear with the people who are guiding in this way, no? Because I think it's important to understand, no? Not to define only, for example, I am PhD in law, no? My thesis doctoral is about lobbying, no? But always I see, okay, law, doctoral, PhD, no? But well, I need many skills in communications, in negotiation, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's important to support and to advise our colleagues or the young people who want to be a professional worker. I think we have to support them to see and to think beyond the profession. Only public affairs is the best, and only that.
And we were talking before about artificial intelligence and the impact, and I think the importance of the personal relationship between the head of communication, the head of public affairs, the head of corporate affairs, that's key, the way they work together to improve the results. So that's something that the computers will never replace, or at least for the moment. So I think we can conclude that we see a professionalization, and we are talking about a profession that is in growth, moving to the training. And before asking Luis if we are training correctly, what are the skills that you every one of you, what are the skills that are most demanded or that are the most important for a public affairs professional? And then I will ask, and Luis, I put the question now, and then you answer to me, are we training in those skills?
Well, if we talk about skills, I would say that strategic thinking is one of the most demanded competencies. But not only that, also critical thinking is also crucial. The ability to read the context, anticipate several scenarios are critical in your profession. And as we have been talking about before, we are facing a significant challenge with AI. The whole sector suffers from a lack of professionals prepared in artificial intelligence. So we need to address this if we want to progress at the same pace as society does.
No, I think I totally agree. I think that if I have to choose a skill, I think the main skill is judgment, no? The critical thinking. I think you can learn legislative procedure, stakeholder mapping, or whatever. But to judge is very difficult. How to, in order to act or to react in front of some events and some facts, you have to judge. And I think this is the main skill that we need to negotiate, to anticipate some risks, to select or to choose in some resources, etc. I think this is the main skill. And for that reason, I think the AI capabilities are really useful in order to judge, it's very useful, the AI capabilities and tools. No?
So Luis, we saw the background in the report we presented. The background is law, the background is international relations, is political science, but we didn't see anything about critical thinking and strategic thinking. So are we training in the right skills? Could we be thinking of a degree in public affairs? What are your thoughts?
Thanks a lot. for those of you not coming from Spain, the big debate the last 2 weeks here has been why are students no longer showing up in universities, right? And we have a big walkout from the study rooms, and the students vote with their feet, right? And this is one of the key issues. Now, of course, it may be saying a lot about the situation of universities and so on. That's a different debate, but it probably also tells us that what is needed is strongly related to skills, right? Not only to the type of knowledge. And I'm convinced that as useful as distance teaching may be for some things, being in a group, sitting through lectures for a number of hours, relating to others is an essential task, right? So I think this is very important to bear in mind. Now, strategic thinking, I fully agree. And I try to tell my students in class, and I see some of my undergraduate students who then took the diploma round. Pierre Bourdieu says that strategic thinking is thinking relationally. What's your position in the group? And this is something that you will translate to the future, and that is a value you can translate to your company and to your clients, right? I mean, not only think of the decision, think what comes after the decision and how you will be relating to your stakeholders after the decision, and so on. And same thing with critical thinking. And probably one of the things that with the future of AI, people are starting to say, people want to see a degree of imperfection in the deliverables, right? Because that shows a human touch. Now, of course, it's very easy to fake an imperfection into something designed in AI. The big thing that will come together, I mean, this is, to me, not different from critical thinking, but Maria, I think you have said it very well. Probably we need also a touch of intuition, right? Because the machine will be telling us something very relevant, but reading the context, you said that is essential. Now, very quickly on the last question, I probably don't think we need an undergraduate degree in public affairs, because probably what we need is still very good, I don't know, geographers, economists, and probably engineers or doctors coming into the profession with this very valuable background, but then acquiring these skills they need to contribute to this profession. So I think that the challenge is what kind of postgraduate training we are providing. So I modestly hope that we are providing a bit of that in our program, but there are a couple of students from last year and one at least from this year, and maybe you can ask them what they think if we are providing that.
And as most of us have already spoke about AI, and we had a table especially on that, whoever wants to chip in, what's the impact of AI in our sector? I believe it's a very positive tool, but how is it impacting the sector from your perspective? David, maybe you want to start?
Well, a huge impact, a huge impact. I think it's an amazing moment. For me, it's an amazing moment for the public affairs profession. Why? No? One of the add values that the profession has to offer is the intelligence. No? Thinking on political intelligence, for example. No? So it's the intelligence. So the AI tools will offer the opportunity to achieve this knowledge very quickly, very cheap, etc. So it's a great opportunity to make cheaper, to make easier, and to make quickly this intelligence. For me, the challenge is how to use this information, how to use this intelligence. I think the companies, in my opinion, do you remember? You remember when, I don't know, maybe 10 years, the digital transformation of the companies. Always, I ask about the public affairs department. You are making this digital transformation? No, look at, I don't know, we don't need it. No, I think the challenge that the profession has, because is this. I think in the companies, in the consultancies, didn't invest from many years in these digital skills, in this knowledge, in the data, in how to do scrapping, etc. No? Only the people who invest for many years now see the AI tools not like a threat, like like an opportunity. So I think it's an opportunity. We have to take advantage of that.
Luis?
I'm not sure if it's true, but it was told to me by a German colleague, so I guess it has an extra value. Apparently, one of the last things that Jürgen Habermas did before passing away was to sue a series of British universities that have launched something called the Habermas machine, where basically you can deliberate without actually discussing with other people. Now, why I'm saying that, because of course I fully agree that it is a tool, that we have to learn about it, and that we need to use it, but I think lobbyists are political mediators, right? I mean, you are there between decision makers and society. Now the big challenge is an epistemic one, because one of the risks is society, my own students, decision makers, will increasingly give more confidence into AI looking more complete and so on than human judgment. And I think that this is a big challenge, and I was a bit concerned with what Enrique was presenting, because I know that the European Commission is using AI for things like reading the position papers and so on, but I don't think when you write position paper, you expect it to be read only by a machine. I mean, you assume that probably not everyone in the Commission can read it, but you expect a dimension of human interaction and human intelligence. So I think that this is probably, as we say in Spanish, the birth pains, and that we will find an accommodation. But I am concerned that if, as a citizen, as a lobbyist, as a political mediator, your only interface is going to be with a machine, and not only because of the biases and so on, humans do have biases as well, but because democracy is about relations between humans, right? So I go back to the issue of relationality.
Yeah, but I would say that AI would help to address technical tasks, and you're going to have more time for establishing relationships, for critical thinking, for looking what your company needs. So AI is here now, and we have to address it, and we have to deal with that. It's mandatory.
Thank you very much, Maria. The last challenge I think I wanted to address, David anticipated it, is the social legitimacy. And I think it's a bit of the elephant in the room. So here I want to talk about regulation. According to many public affairs professionals, together with transparency, is a key challenge for the future of the sector. My question to you, and I will put two challenges together, is what do you think should be the next steps on regulation, having heard the situation in the different member states of the European Union and knowing what we have at European level. So challenge one, regulation. Challenge two, and this one is specifically to you, David, is how can the sector improve its image and especially the perception that you mentioned among society? What's the role of media on this? And if you know if the perception is similar in other countries. So regulation and perception. David, if you want to start.
Well, about perception, no? I don't know how to recommend about that, but I think through transparency, through education, through good practices, best practices, we have to promote this social legitimacy. No? I think the media also has a role. No? Yesterday in the Spanish Parliament, no? Maybe you see or you read that one of the members said, which is the difference of when finish the lobbying, and when is starting the traffic of influences. No?
They said that.
Yes, yesterday, yes. No? So this is a success of the profession. And I think you, APRI, etc., the professional, you professionals that you work for many years, I see Maria Rosa at this moment. I remember when 20 years ago we were speaking about that, or you were speaking. Now we are not speaking about corruption. We are speaking about professional activity. No? So I think you are doing that. You are working in that. We have to do more things. No? I think let me speak about Democrata. I think the role of the media is also to explain which is the difference between traffic of influence and between the right of participation. So this is the obligation. Of course, we have to report about the bad practices. The obligation of the media is also to report about their interests, how to try to influence the public decisions. Of course, this is our role as a media, but also in this framework, we have to highlight the people who is doing well. We have to highlight also the right of the participation, because we have to highlight that this is a fundamental right. It's not a privilege. This is not a privilege. Let me connect, for example, the name of the society of my media, of Demócrata, is Información y Participación SL. We are speaking about two rights, the right of information, the right of communication, and the right of participation. So the role of the media to support our democracy is to inform, to give more information in order to give more critical judgment to the people, to the companies, to the organizations. The role of the public affairs is also to support the best public decisions. So this is, I think this is the way that you have to do, and I have to say, please take advantage of Demócrata. Take advantage of that. We are speaking about our democracy, not about consultancies, not about profession. Sorry.
Luis, especially on regulation, especially as with your experience or perception, whatever you want to answer.
I'm going to speak only about perception. There are many people, including the room and before me, that know more about regulation than myself. Now, I just want to build upon what David has said. And again, just to show that I don't only speak badly about the lawyers, I think here, probably the profession can learn something from the lawyers. Now, what do I mean? In the European continental system, in the, let's say, Roman tradition, the lawyer is not only providing a service to his client, he is an agent of the system. I mean, the lawyer in our systems is part of the rule of law, is part of the empire of law. And that this is probably something where we have to start saying of this profession. I mean, the lawyer is not only someone providing a service to his client, he is also, he should be producing positive externalities. Now, if this is the case, then we have to move on a different thing, which is, and I know that this is difficult for a small, young profession, but we have to start thinking of if a lobbyist is someone that I need to have my voice heard, then how does it become affordable and part of a pluralistic society, right? So now, the issue here is, to what extent can the profession also provide services to a more diverse set of stakeholders? I am the typical small association who is very indignant with this methane plant getting into my town. How can I hire a lobbyist for the public good? Now, of course, if I cannot afford it, and so on, and I know that this is a difficult thing for a small profession, and probably it can be tied to regulation. I don't know how, but probably there are brighter minds in the room to tie that to regulation. But the issue is how this profession can be perceived as operating for the public good and not for the, let's say, usual suspects. And I think that this is the next challenge, and probably in Spain, but in most other countries.
Sorry, let me say, many people ask us, oh, is legal, the profession? Please, yes, it's in the Constitution. Always I say, well, okay, thank you. It's in our Constitution. Of course it's legal. And when the people ask, but is it regulated? Yes, the base is regulated because it's in the Constitution. I think it's important in the profession, explain more this.
Thank you for the reflection. We need to end, but I want to conclude in a positive way, at least I hope. If you can describe the situation or the reality of the public affairs sector, not only APRI, but the public affairs sector in Spain, what would be that word that would describe the situation of the public affairs sector? And with that, we pass to the next session. Maria, if you want to start.
Yeah, I would say maybe evolving The profession is evolving from a traditional way of doing things to a more modern way, incorporating tools like AI. And I will finish here.
I think the profession is putting up a nice fight.
One word, opportunity, no? Oh, sorry. I think in one word, it's an opportunity, more than one word. I think the profession, as you mentioned, is a tool to support our democracy and to support the relationship between organizations or companies, civil society, and public decision makers.
That's a nice ending, David. We will wrap it there. Thank you very much, three of you.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all very much for this interesting panel, and also to all the speakers who have joined us today here in the Europe room of the Spanish Senate on what I think we could call quite a historic day for APRI and for PACE. We're very happy to have you all here. Today's event, which is now coming to an end, has been a truly European one. And from the very beginning, the team that organized it wanted to include an expert voice who could share with us an analysis of Europe's current geopolitical and economic situation. The first name that came to mind, quite naturally, was Charles Powell. And as a director of APRI, I would like to thank him for saying yes from the very first moment. And as an internationalist, and there are a little bit more here in this room, I must say that is a true honor for me to introduce him today, although my introduction can only be a brief summary of Dr. Powell's very extensive career. I don't know if it's been expensive. Indeed it is, because he studied at Oxford University, and that's I think it's quite
my parents
expensive.
would have something to say about that,
his parents agree with me. But it's also a very extensive one, because Charles Powell has been director of Elcano Royal Institute, the Spain leading international relations think tank, since 2012. But before that, he studied in history and modern languages at University of Oxford, where he also received a doctorate in history for his thesis on Spain's transition to democracy. While at Oxford, he was a lecturer at Corpus Christi College, a J.A. Pai Fellow at University College, and a junior fellow at research at St. Anthony's College. He has also been a visiting professor at the Catholic University of Portugal and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. During his career, he has supervised 8 doctoral theses, examined 30, and lectured in more than 50 countries across Europe, Africa, the Americas, and Asia. He has published 7 books and many articles on Spanish political history and foreign policy, European integration, and the so-called liberal international order. Dr. Powell is also an officer of the Order of the Star of Italy, a companion of the Most Distinguished Order of St. Michael and St. George, a commander of the Order of Merit of the Republic of Romania, and a Knight of the Order of Merit of the Republic of Poland. Dr. Powell, thank you very much again for saying yes, for being here. Please be welcome. We are very much looking forward to listening to you.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here. I used to be a speechwriter for the Speaker of the Congress of Deputies, So this is the rival chamber, but I won't hold anyone against that. The Senate is, of course, a very important institution as well. And thank you for that Freudian slip about expensive curricula. You know, I'm so old that when I went up to Oxford in 1978, the government actually paid us to study. Extraordinary. Good old British welfare state. This is before Mrs. Thatcher, of course. So my parents actually didn't have to pay anything for me to study. Anyway, thank you for the invitation. I have about 30 minutes, and I know better than to stand between an audience and their lunch. So I will try to stick to those 30 minutes. And basically, I've been asked to talk about the challenges facing Europe, both geopolitical and economic. And I'll start off very quickly by giving you some background context to where I think we are in Europe today. So, first of all, what kind of world are we living in? There's a big debate amongst international relations specialists. Some people are beginning to argue that we live in a G2 world dominated by the US and China. And of course, if you followed the recent visit by the wonderful Donald Trump to Beijing the other week, you might come to the same conclusion. And obviously, both sides seem to be quite happy with that notion. I think that it's true that the China-US rivalry is probably the most important phenomenon in terms of characterizing the international order today. It's a systemic rivalry, and it's probably going to be with us for 40, 50, 60 years to come. But I think, in a sense, seeing the world through that prism is too simplistic. I think there's much more, thank God, to the international world order than just the US-China rivalry. I think basically we are transitioning towards a multipolar world, which remains undefined as far as its main features and characteristics are concerned, but it's a multipolar world in which medium-sized powers are playing an increasingly important role. And I think this is something to keep in mind. We academics don't really like multipolarity. We're more comfortable with unipolarity or bipolarity, probably because we're intellectually lazy sometimes, and we're familiar with unipolarity and bipolarity. Multipolarity, by definition, is messy, it's complicated, it's unpredictable. And some of us, or some people, don't actually want to go there yet, but I think that's where the world is heading. The second big feature, I think, is the weakening of the so-called liberal international order. But I think we have to be careful about being too nostalgic here. Mark Carney, the wonderful Prime Minister of Canada, already warned us about this at the Munich Security Conference. And one of my professors in the States, Joseph Nye, said this very eloquently a few years ago when he said, actually, the liberal international order is really neither liberal, nor particularly international, nor very orderly. You know, so... And actually, Voltaire had said something similar in the 18th century about the Holy Roman Empire. It wasn't really very holy, it wasn't even Roman, and it certainly wasn't an empire. So I think we have to be careful about this nostalgia. Yes, we have the remains, the remnants of a international world order which was established in the post-World War II period, but obviously that is evolving very quickly as well. And in fact, together with multilateralism, what we often have now is minilateralism. In other words, clusters of states that come together to deal with specific challenges. For example, the energy crisis, health crises, or climate change. So moving on quickly, what about the European Union? I'm going to assume that the European Union is the same as Europe. Of course, you all know that's not true, and I very much like to think that Brexit is reversible. So I have Britain in the back of my mind when I think of Europe as well, when I talk about the EU. But what are we? We represent about 18% of the world's GDP and only 6% of the world's population. Remember, the US represents about 25% of global GDP, and China, more or less like us, 16, 17% of the global economy. Between us, the 27 member states account for $20 trillion in terms of GDP. And we are, of course, I would argue, above all, a single market of 450 million people. This is actually our biggest asset. I think, you know, this is really what defines us today. We are also, of course, the world's largest trading bloc. However, so this sounds positive, but there are some caveats here. First of all, Are we a pole in this multipolar world? Do we, as a European Union, actually envisage ourselves as being a pole in this multipolar world, together with China, Russia, the US, India, etc.? There's a bit of tension there, right? Because big countries like Germany and France probably continue to see themselves as national poles in this multipolar order. Secondly, of course, we are very far from being a superstate. We're not a federation. We are still 27 independent member states. We have a wonderful motto in our treaties, which says, united in diversity. This is a bit like the American motto, e pluribus unum. I would have gone for the Latin version, but okay. United in diversity. And of course, very often one feels that there's much more, this is aspirational. We're not there yet, right? We're still a very heterogeneous block of 27 member states. And the main argument is that we are, as a union, an entity which feels very uncomfortable in the current geopolitical context that we live in. We were created as a community of law. We were essentially founded as a normative power. In other words, a union whose main strength lay in its ability to project norms abroad. And of course, the problem is that most of the norms that we actually believe in and represent are being contested universally by China, by Russia, and increasingly, sadly, by the Trump administration as well. So this is a world dominated by rivalry between large powers, characterized by nuclear proliferation, the weaponization of trade. It's an increasingly transactional and coercive world. And we are not fit for purpose, really. We weren't designed for this. We are a herbivorous entity surrounded by carnivores. I hope the vegetarians in the room won't be offended. And the traditional complaint about the EU before 2022 was that we had basically outsourced our trade and manufacturing to China. We had outsourced our security and our defense to the United States, and we had outsourced our energy provision to Russia. This is a bit exaggerated, but not entirely inaccurate. And as a result, I will mainly deal with these three states. And I'm just trying to give you a very quick account of how I see our relationship, our challenges originating in these three states. So the most immediate challenge to the European Union obviously comes from Russia. To my mind, the war that Russia has illegally and totally arbitrarily embarked on in Ukraine, it's a war of choice, is an existential threat to the European Union. If we do not stand up to Russia, if we allow Ukraine to fail, then other frontline European states will probably be in severe danger. The good news, as you probably know, is that Ukraine is heroically resisting this massive 4-year onslaught and is actually holding its own. But to be totally honest with you, I think we are in a state of what one of my colleagues has described as a stalemated attritional conflict. In other words, Russia cannot win, Ukraine cannot expel Russia from about 18% of its territory, and therefore this is not a good position to be in. Europe so far, by the way, has provided about 187 billion euros in its military and economic aid to Ukraine, and right now we are basically maintaining Ukraine alive. The Americans have pulled out economically. At least they are still allowing us to buy their weapons in order to send them to Ukraine, but the US has basically pulled out of this conflict, and we will increasingly shoulder the military and economic burden for maintaining Ukraine alive. Now, one good news, I think, and interesting phenomenon, which is often not stressed enough, is that our economies have almost completely decoupled from Russia. And this was not an easy thing to do, especially Germany and especially in the energy field. So this proves that in a matter of 3-4 years, the European Union, when it really wants to, can really change the situation quite dramatically. Second challenge, China. This is much more subtle, it's much more complex, it's much more systemic, and it's likely to last longer. Now, back in 1929, the European Union, in its wisdom, and I'm saying this only half facetiously, the European Union, in its wisdom, described China simultaneously as a partner, for example, in the struggle against climate change, as a competitor in terms of our markets, and as a systemic rival. In other words, we understood that we have to live with China, but at the same time, we alerted our countries to this problem. Now, looking back at what's happened since 2019, I think the conclusion is that we are not decoupling from China, but we are seriously de-risking. We are diversifying our supply chains, we are protecting sensitive technologies, we are screening Chinese investments, we are reducing our reliance on batteries, rare earths, and semiconductors. But, of course, let me remind you, EU-China trade amounts to 700 billion euros every year. And of course, remember also that the European Union today basically has two systemic goals, the green transition and the digital transition, and we actually need Chinese raw materials and inputs in order to achieve both. In other words, China is too important to isolate, China is too powerful to ignore, and it is too risky to depend on. There is, of course, an additional problem, and that is that China tends to divide us. There are panda huggers, countries which are closer to China, and there are hawks, possibly the Nordics in particular, and Poland, which are much tougher on China. Spain is probably somewhere in between, although this is a controversial issue. Third geopolitical challenge, the United States of America. Now, as an old-time Atlanticist, it pains me to have to describe the United States, or more particularly, more specifically, the Trump administration as a geopolitical challenge to Europe, but I think it is. And the reason is that this is not just about Trump, actually. This is structural. Trump is as much a symptom as a cause of what America is experiencing. I would argue that what we are seeing is a process which began 20 years ago. It was already evident under President Obama, who is so popular in Europe, and probably rightly so. But remember, it was he who started the pivot to Asia in 2011. It was also he who said that NATO countries should spend at least 2% of GDP in 2014. In other words, the United States has been recalibrating its relationship with Europe for a long time. Admittedly, Trump is uniquely brutal, insensitive, insulting, and, may I add, corrupt. Actually, incredibly corrupt, by the way. But the problem is that he has forced us to reconsider. We are no longer sure that the United States would actually implement Article 5, say if a country like Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania were attacked by Russia. He has generated a lot of tension, demanding that NATO countries spend 5% on defense. It could have been 6%, it could have been 12%. There is no science in this figure, let me assure you. It could have been 3%. By the way, the US only spends 3.4% on defense. So, you know, why should we Europeans spend 5%? If Estonia produces 5%, this is a tiny proportion of money. If Spain were to invest 5%, that would be about 80, 90 billion euros a year. At the same time, obviously, Trump strongly dislikes the European Union. I would argue because actually deep down he is aware that we are stronger together. And he is aware of the fact that cherry picking is a good strategy for the US if they want to weaken and divide us. But some of the things that he has done are really outrageous, claiming that the US would take over Greenland, which belongs to the Kingdom of Denmark, which is a member of the European Union, as you all know. I think the EU was actually quite effective in blocking that, and I think we should congratulate ourselves for it. So some people are arguing that actually his bark is worse than his bite. An American journalist about 10 years ago asked herself, should Trump be taken literally or should he be taken seriously? And that's a very interesting debate, but I don't have time to go there. So this also divides us. Understandably, the Baltic states cannot think of a world without US protection. We in Spain here are perhaps more sanguine because we are further away from Russia. So we face a number of dilemmas. Does NATO have a future? Is the US a reliable partner? There are some incredible polls out there which suggest that a vast majority of our European citizens do not regard America as a reliable partner anymore. In some countries, Xi Jinping is regarded as a more reliable partner than Donald Trump, which would be hysterically funny if it were not so serious. Now, the real drama is that we in the EU cannot defend our territory on our own. We do not have the ability to defend European territory without the US. And this isn't because we don't spend on defense. We spend about 350 billion euros on defense every year. That's a lot of money. China spends about 500 billion, the US spends about 950 billion. The problem is we spend very badly. To borrow an American phrase, we get very little bang for our buck. And this is for all sorts of reasons. I don't have time to go into that. But basically, we are short of capabilities. We are short of command and control structures. We are short of technology and innovation. And of course, we don't have a nuclear deterrent. Only Britain and France have nuclear weapons, and we are lagging behind in all of these areas. The European answer to this has been a French idea. The French are wonderful with their ideas. I wish I was French sometimes, frankly. It's autonomie stratégique. Monsieur Macron brilliantly defined this, and it's a powerful idea. It's a very good idea. The problem is that it remains unclear as to whether we can achieve genuine strategic autonomy in a reasonable amount of time. So basically, we have to decide between building a European defense system which is separate from the United States, or strengthening the European pillar within NATO and hoping that somehow things will be okay. But I'm very skeptical about this. I think we should remember that the transatlantic relationship will never be what it was. How do we answer to these challenges? How do we answer these challenges geopolitically? Well, first of all, we are strengthening our ties with like-minded partners all over the world. Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, India, which I want to regard as a like-minded partner. And almost more importantly, perhaps, we are also strengthening our relations with the so-called Global South. I say so-called because the Global South is not a concept I particularly like. It's very heterogeneous. It includes, countries from Mauritania to, Saudi Arabia, and those are very different countries. But basically, we are strengthening our presence in the Global South, in Latin America, in Asia, and in Africa. The EU-Mercosur agreement, which was signed earlier this year, is a good sign of that. Sadly, it took us 25 years to negotiate. I think some negotiators must have died along the way. But anyway, we got there in the end. And we've also recently signed a trade agreement with Indonesia, for example. Our big problem in the Global South is that we are constantly accused of double standards. When we go to Global South countries and say, you should condemn Russia and defend Ukraine and help Ukraine, they will turn to us and say, you have allowed 70,000 Palestinians to be murdered in Gaza and have done nothing effectively to prevent it. So we do have a serious credibility problem there. Let me move on quickly to the economic challenges that we face. First of all, the short-term ones, which are perhaps of most interest nowadays. As a result of the conflict in the Middle East, which is a euphemism, it's a war of choice, which the United States and Israel have embarked themselves on. We are worried, obviously, about the economic impact of that. The Strait of Hormuz, as you know, is a crucial choke point. There was a very famous book written a couple of years about economic choke points, and of course the Strait of Hormuz was very prominent in that analysis. 20% of the world's oil flows through the strait, a significant amount of the world's liquefied natural gas, and more importantly, perhaps less mentioned, fertilizers flows through the Strait of Hormuz. There is a serious possibility of food shortages in Asia and Africa as a result of that. Now, surprisingly, the good news is that oil prices haven't increased as much as we feared. They are currently, Brent is at about $104, $105 per barrel. Before the conflict, admittedly, the price was about 60 to 80%, but people were talking about $150 to $200 per barrel. We're not there yet. Why not? Hopefully it never will be. First of all, because Hormuz isn't actually totally closed. Quite a lot of ships are getting through. Secondly, most of the oil-producing countries had enormous reserves, unusually high reserves. The foreign minister of Saudi was in El Kano the other day in my think tank, and he explained how incredibly lucky Saudi Arabia was because they are full to the brim. And thirdly, markets, rightly or wrongly, do actually believe that a deal, some kind of peace deal, is possible. The Saudi minister, by the way, he was in Elkanah last week, he said we have a window of opportunity of about 2 to 3 weeks. If there isn't an agreement by the end of 3 weeks, we probably will begin to feel the economic consequences. And let me turn finally to the structural economic challenges, which I think we are all familiar with and which those of us who live in European Union countries. First of all, we have had very slow economic growth, stagnation, and low productivity over the last decade or so. In recent years, Spain is a bit of an exception. The Spanish economy this year will grow at about 2.4%, the fastest growing economy in the EU. Secondly, we have aging populations and demographic decline. This is a tragedy, and it's extremely serious, and it's very serious in Spain. We have the second longest life expectancy in the world, and it's now the 5th year in which there have been more deaths than births. So this is really very serious, and the fact that we have very large immigration does not compensate for this, because as you probably know, migrants very quickly adapt to the prevailing norms in the country to which they migrate. So Moroccan women do not want to have 10 children if they can possibly avoid it. They will tend to have 1 or 2 at most. Thirdly, we have very high energy costs by and large, and also industrial competitiveness problems. Fourthly, we have enormous dependence on external supply chains. And finally, we suffer from weak innovation and technology scaling problems. What are the solutions to these issues? Well, if I really had a silver bullet, I would be president of the Commission, but I'm not. We have 2 very good reports, Letta and Draghi. I think the diagnosis is widely, generally accepted by experts. Letta has basically told us that we need to do something very simple. I said earlier, we are a single market of 450 million people. We are not. Our single market is actually very deficient. We do not have a single market in energy, in telecommunications, in finance, in defense, or in digital services. In other words, in many of the most productive and competitive sectors of our economy. We don't have a capital markets union, and that is why every single year, 800 billion euros make their way to the United States instead of to European companies and European startups. Why? Because the return on those 800 billion euros is much higher in the US than it is here. And Letta has also, interestingly, argued in favor of creating, acknowledging and protecting a 5th freedom. As you know, the EU embodies 4 freedoms already: freedom in goods and services, capital and people. He is advocating for a 5th freedom, which would encompass the knowledge, innovation, educational, and research spheres. A wonderful idea, no doubt. He also would like a relaxation in EU competition rules, which would enable us to build European Union industrial champions. Draghi is perhaps even more ambitious. I'm not sure that he's more realistic, but he's more ambitious, because he basically argues that we would need to spend approximately 800 billion euros more every year on investment. Investment basically in European public goods. And this, he argues, would enable us to have a common EU industrial strategy in areas such as AI, semiconductors, defense, energy, quantum computing, and biotechnology, together with the green industries. The problem with both of these diagnoses, I said the French are very creative, the Italians are similarly creative, they punch above their weight in the European Union, which is something I've always admired, is that this requires political will. Above all, it requires joint EU financing. It would need issuing common EU debt and EU-level borrowing. And this, as you well know, is still very controversial in the so-called frugal countries. I'm not sure who is frugal in Europe anymore, to be honest. I mean, you know, the German economy is in a complete mess, absolute disaster. And the Dutch, who are my favorite frugal people in the world, well, okay, it's the 4th largest EU economy, but not doing very well, frankly. So frugality, you know, is perhaps overstated sometimes. So simplifying regulation is something that Draghi advocates, and this is something that practically all of us, I think, would sign up to. In short, therefore, we know what we need to do, but are we actually going to have, as I said earlier, the political will to do this? And also, what would the social and political impact of this be? Can we do these things without fundamentally modifying the European social contract? And this is something we often lose sight of. Someone in the earlier session was talking about the challenges that European democracy is facing. I would go even further than that. Yes, admittedly, European democracy is under stress, but I think the European social contract is also under stress. Can we really afford our generally rather broad and generous welfare states? I wish the answer was yes and clear-cut, but I'm not sure that is the case. So what is my hope then, to conclude? My hope is that, ironically perhaps, these external factors that I started describing, coming from China, Russia, and surprisingly the United States, will actually act as external federators. In other words, they will force us to take unpopular, difficult decisions which we might otherwise not have been willing to countenance. In other words, they are forcing us Europeans to finally wake up and smell the coffee. Otherwise, our future, sadly, I think, holds decline and growing irrelevance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Powell. As we all have seen, having the opportunity to listen to you is something priceless. We can't put a price on that. So thank you very much for being here today. And now it's just time for the closing remarks. So if the President of PACE can, thank you.
I'm happy to do so. It seems very important. Wow, what can I say after that? Except that APRI, you raised the bar so high that it will be very difficult for the next editions of the summit to achieve the same accomplishment. What a day, what depth and insightful contributions from everybody. I don't know about you, but I'm very, very grateful for everything that happened this morning here in this wonderful building. So thank you very much for all your effort and for you guys coming from all over Europe and being here with us this year again. So let's see what next year we are still debating on the next year host. I'm looking intentionally towards Netherlands. So thank you very much for today. And well, see you soon. Thank you.